Welcome back to another Roblox Studio tutorial. In today's video, we're going to start a series on first-person shooters, and we're going to be adding different things like how to set up a gun. We'll set up leaderboards that keep track of kills and deaths, and then we'll also do a few more things. So one of the things we're going to take a look at is how to create a gun. So this gun right here can shoot bullets, and then if the bullets hit another player, they'll do damage. So let me go and find where my guy went to. He's trying to run from me. Okay, and if you're playing on a server with other players, then it'll actually keep track of how many times you kill a player and also how many times you die. So let me go ahead and load up a local server and we can take a look at that part of it. Okay, so now if you're in a server with some other players, and let's say I kill this player up top here, then in the leaderboards you can see that my player 2 got 1 kill, and then player 1 has 1 for the deaths category. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive in and see how we can do some of this stuff in Roblox Studio. Alright, so in this series, we're going to start off by getting the gun to shoot bullets. To do that, we need a gun model. And for the gun model, you can either create your own if you want to do that. For this example, I just took this one from the toolbox and wrote my own scripts for it. So let me go ahead and show you where I got that from. So if you go under the View tab and open up the toolbox, and then search gun up in the search bar, I used this one right here, the one that says pistol. And then for the actual tool, I just cleared it off and deleted all the extra stuff. So basically, I deleted everything except for the actual model. Alright, so that's the only part of it that I'm using, so I'm not actually using any pre-made scripts that came with it. So we're actually going to be writing our own scripts for this so that you can take that script and move it to any model that you want to. The one thing that's important to keep in mind is when you're searching through the toolbox for a gun, they're not all created the same. So what you're really looking for is a tool where all the parts are grouped into one part, and then you want to make sure that part is called handle. If you find a tool that you like and all the parts are kind of separate, see if you can go under the model tab and select all the parts and use the union button to group them all together, and then rename that union to handle. So the script that we're going to be doing should work for most items, as long as it looks something similar to this, where all the parts are composed into something called handle. Alright, so while we have the toolbox open, let's go ahead and get a sound for our gun as well. So if you click on the drop-down menu, you want to select audio. And then in the search bar, you can search something like gunshot. And then you can take a look through some of these to see what they sound like. And once you find one that you like, you're going to click it. That'll insert it into the workspace. And then from the workspace, you just want to drag it inside the handle of the handgun. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is start working on a local script for this tool. So go ahead and find your gun over in the Explorer menu and click on the plus sign. And then we're going to be adding a local script. For this local script, we're going to start by making a reference for the gun. So we'll say local gun, and this is going to be equal to script.parent. After that, we're going to make a reference for the sound. So we'll say local, and then we'll say gun_shot, and this is going to be equal to gun.handle, and then inside the handle is where we stored the sound, so it's right here. So since there's a space in between gun and the word shot, we're going to use square brackets, and then we'll put the name of it inside parentheses, so we'll say gun, space, and then shot. Next, we're going to create a function that will run whenever the user clicks. So we're going to start by saying gun.equipped. So this is when the player equips the gun. We're going to say :connect. Inside the parentheses, we're going to define a function. Inside this function, we're going to pass the mouse object. And then inside this function, we're going to define another function. We're going to say mouse.button1down. And then we'll be connecting this. Inside the parentheses will be another function. This time we're not going to pass any parameters. But what we're going to do first inside this function is just play the sound. And we can do that by saying gun_shot and then :play. So this will be a good test to see if whenever I click the mouse, if I can hear that gunshot. All right, so let's go ahead and run the code and check it out. Okay, so now whenever I equip the gun and click the mouse, we hear a gunshot. Okay, so next on the to-do list is to get a bullet to shoot from the gun. We're going to be doing this in a couple different parts, but the basic idea is we're going to have a click event on the client side. We're going to send some information to the server side, such as where the click is happening, and also the gun's position. And then from there, we're going to create a part and use velocity to make it shoot. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the local script and we'll get started on that. So since we need to connect the client side to the server side, we're going to be using remote events. So let's go ahead and define those right here. So first we're going to say local replicated storage. And this is going to be equal to game :get service. Inside the parentheses, it's going to be replicated storage. And then, so next what we need to do is actually create that remote event. So under replicated storage, we're going to click on the plus sign. And you're going to add a remote event. And then go ahead and rename that remote event to shot event. After you do that, we're going to define a variable for that remote event. And we'll say local remote event. And this is going to be equal to replicated storage, which is where it's located. Inside replicated storage, we're going to say : wait for child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put the name of the remote event, which is shot event. So next, inside this function, in addition to playing that sound, we also want to trigger that remote event so that we can write a script on the server side. To do that, we're going to say remote event : fire server. Inside the parentheses, we can pass some information to the server. And what we're going to give to the server is the position of the gun, which is going to be gun.handle.position. We also want to send the location of the user's mouse, which we can do by saying mouse.hit.p. All right, so now that we have everything handled on the client side, let's go and work on the server side now. So we're going to be inserting a script into the server script service. So go ahead and click on the plus sign, and then click on script. And then you want to rename the script to what I have right here, which is bullet create. Inside the script, we're going to start by referencing the replicated storage and also the remote event. Since those are going to be the same as what we just wrote, we can head back to the local script and copy these two lines right here. And then we're going to paste them inside of our script here. Next, we're going to write a function that's going to run whenever the remote event gets triggered, which will happen whenever a user clicks their mouse. So we're going to say remote event dot on server event. And then we're going to connect this with a function. Inside the function, we're going to pass the information we got from the client. So from the client side, we get the player automatically, which is the player that triggered the event. We also sent two additional pieces of information. So if we look at the local script, we sent the position of the gun. So I'm going to create a variable called gun, and then POS for position. We also sent the mouse position. So to store that, I'm going to say MOS, and then POS for position. Okay, just to test to make sure that this is working, let's go ahead and print off those two different variables. So we're going to print the gun's position, and then we're also going to print the mouse position. Okay, so before we run the game, let's go up to the View tab and select Output so that we can see the result. So now I'm going to run the game. So this error right here is part of the NPC, so don't worry about that part of it. So now whenever I shoot the gun, you'll see a couple sets of numbers right down here. The first one is the gun's position, and the second one is the mouse position. So by doing this, we know that our remote event is working, and we have those two pieces of information. So the next thing we can do is start working on creating the bullet. All right, so let's start working on creating the bullet whenever the user clicks the mouse. So we want this to happen on the server side, so we're going to be writing this script under the bullet create script that we put under server script service. So for now, we can go and delete these print messages since we know it's working. So what we're going to be doing is creating a new part and then changing some of its properties to make it look like a bullet. For now though, let's just keep it simple and just create a normal part. We can do that by saying local bullet, and this is going to be equal to instance dot new. Inside the parentheses, we're going to be creating a part. Then we're going to say bullet dot name, and this is going to be equal to bullet. After that, we'll say bullet dot parent, and this is going to be equal to game.workspace. And then we're going to set the position of the bullet by saying bullet dot position. And for now, we're going to set this equal to the gun's position by saying equal to, and then gun POS. We're going to be changing this as we go along. For now, though, we're just going to test to see that whenever the user clicks the mouse, it's going to create a part. We don't really care what the part looks like at this point. We just want to see that something is created. All right, so let's go and run the game and check it out. Okay, so now whenever the user clicks the mouse, you can see a part appears. Obviously, this is much too large for a bullet, but it's a good start to see that we created an object. So now that we have an object being created whenever the user clicks the mouse, the next thing we're going to work on is getting this object to move, just like a bullet would. We're going to leave it big for now, just so it's easy to see that motion. And once we have the motion down, then we'll go back and refine the bullet. So we're going to head back under the bullet create script. And what we're going to do to make this object move is start with a distance variable, which is going to be the distance between the mouse and the gun. We're going to define that by saying local distance is going to be equal to parentheses mouse position. We're going to say minus gun position. So you can think of this, the mouse is far away, so we're taking the mouse's position and subtracting the gun position. And what that's going to do, it's going to give us the distance between those 2 points. Outside the parentheses, we're going to say dot magnitude. So altogether, that's going to give us the distance between the mouse position and the gun. Then we're going to define a speed for our bullet. So we'll say local speed is equal to, for the value here, I'm going to do 500. You can adjust this if you want to make the bullet faster or slower. After that, we're going to say bullet dot C-frame. So this will be the position of the bullet in the game. And this is going to be equal to C-frame dot new. Inside the parentheses, it's going to start at the gun's position and go to the mouse position. And then here we're going to be adding the velocity for the bullet by saying bullet dot velocity. And this is going to be equal to bullet dot C-frame. And then we're going to say dot look vector. And then we're going to multiply this by the speed. All right, so let's go ahead and run the code now and see what we have. Okay, so now when I click the mouse, we have a part that shoots off. All right, so everything looks good so far. Before we move on to making the bullet look more like a bullet, let's go ahead and adjust the speed variable so you can see what effect that has. So back on the script here, let's make it something small, like maybe 50. And now if I shoot my gun, let's take a look at the bullet. So you can see if I lower the speed, it shoots much slower and also doesn't shoot as far. And let's go back to the script now, and we'll try something larger than 500. So before it was 500, so let's double that and see what 1000 looks like. All right, so I'm going to shoot my gun with the speed set to 1000. So it's similar to the 500, but it's just going a little bit faster. So you can adjust that number to whatever you like. I think 500 looks pretty good, so that's what I'm going to keep it at. All right, so far we have created the bullet object and used velocity to make it move. So the last thing we're going to do before we end with this video is make it look more like a bullet. So to do that, basically all we're going to be doing is changing the properties of it. So up here where we define the bullet object, let's go ahead and add a couple more things. So first off, I don't need this line of code anymore since we're using the velocity down here to move the object. So the first thing I want to do is change this from a block part into a cylinder. And we can do that by saying bullet dot shape. And this is going to be equal to enum dot part type. And then from the part type, we're going to select cylinder. Next, we need to make our bullet quite a bit smaller than it already is. And we can do that by saying bullet dot size. And this is going to be equal to a vector3 dot new. So what you're going to put inside these parentheses will be the dimensions or the size of the object. The first part will be the x, the second part will be the y dimension, and the third part will be the z. So after experimenting, some numbers that I think look pretty good as a starting point are 0.5 for the x, 0.25 for the y, and 0.5 for the z. Finally, let's go ahead and change the color of it, and we can do that by saying bullet dot brick color is going to be equal to brick color dot new. Inside the parentheses, you can choose the color. For now, though, I'm just going to choose gold. Alright, so let's go ahead and run our script now and see how our bullet looks. So now if I shoot my gun, it looks a little bit more like a bullet. It looks like it's sideways though, so let's see if we can fix that real quick. So to help us out a little bit to see which way we need to rotate the object, I'm just going to insert a cylinder into the game real quick. And then if we use the rotate option. And then for the properties of this part, what I'm going to be looking at is the orientation. So let's go ahead and use the green ball to rotate it to the way we want. Okay, and we see for the orientation, I need to change the Y part to -90. And on the script here, the way we're going to change that is by saying bullet dot orientation. And this is going to be equal to vector3 dot new. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put 0 for the X part, -90 for the Y, and then 0 for the Z. Alright, so let's go ahead and run the code and check it out. Okay, and now if I shoot the gun, the bullets are facing forward. So feel free to play around with these numbers to customize the look of the bullet. Alright, so I think this is a good stopping point for this video. So in this video, what we did is we took a gun model, which you can either create or take from the toolbox. And then we added a local script to that gun so that whenever the user clicks the mouse, it's going to play a sound and then send a few pieces of information to the server. And then on the server side, we actually created that bullet object. We changed some of its properties to make it look a little bit more like a bullet. And then we changed the bullet's velocity to make it move. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by making the bullet objects that we created last time actually damage players. Alright, so to make our bullet objects actually damage other players in the game, what we're going to do is write a damage script, and we're going to store that in the server storage. And then whenever we create a bullet object, we're going to attach that script to it. So for now, you can just make a blank script and store it in the server storage, and make sure you rename it to damage. After that, we're going to write a few more lines under our bullet create script, which we started in the server script service. So right in between these two chunks of code, what we're going to do is make a copy of the damage script, and then we're going to parent it to the bullet. So we're going to say local damage script is going to be equal to server storage. And we haven't actually defined what that is yet, so let's go ahead and do that up here. So up here, we'll say local server storage. This is going to be equal to game, get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put server storage. So now we can continue down here. So in the server storage, we're going to say find first child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put the name of the script, which is damage. After that, we're going to say and clone. So this will make a copy of that script. And then we need to give it to the bullet by saying damage script dot parent. And then we're going to be attaching this to the bullet. Alright, so let's go ahead and test to make sure this is working. So whenever we create the bullet, we want to see that the script gets attached to it. So once you shoot that bullet, it's going to show up in the workspace. And we can see under that bullet, it has our damage script. So we know that part of it's working. So what we're going to work on next is actually the script that's going to go inside of that. Okay, so now we're going to start working under this damage script. So just to remind you, this is under the server storage in a script called damage. We're going to start off by creating a reference for the bullet. So since this script is going to be inside the bullet, we can define it by saying local bullet. And it's going to be equal to script.parent. After that, we're going to create a touch event function so that whenever it touches another object, we're going to check to see if it's a humanoid. And if we do find a humanoid, then we're going to damage it. So we'll do that by saying local function. The name of this function can be something like player check. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass other part, which is the other object the bullet comes in contact with. Inside the function, we're going to define a variable called humanoid by saying local humanoid. And this is going to be equal to other part dot parent find first child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put humanoid. And then to check to see if a humanoid object was hit, we're going to say if humanoid. And then to damage the humanoid player, we're going to say humanoid, take damage. And then inside the parentheses will be the amount of damage we want to deal. So I'm going to set it at 30 to begin with, and then we can adjust this later on if we need to. Finally, outside this function, we're going to define the touch event and connect it to this function. So we'll say bullet.touched, connect, and then we'll connect it to the function by saying player_check. There we go. So let's go ahead and try it out and see if it's working. Okay, so now I'm going to shoot the NPC, which has a humanoid part, and we can take a look and see what happens. And as you can see, it damaged the humanoid object, but it also dealt me some damage. So what we need to do is come up with a way of making sure that the bullet doesn't actually damage the player shooting the weapon. The way that we're going to do that is by adding another section to the bullet create script. So remember, this is the script that we started in the server script service. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be attaching a string value to each bullet that has the information of who shot the bullet. So right down here, we're going to start that off by saying local attacker is going to be equal to instance.new. We're going to be creating a string value to store the name of the player. Then we'll say attacker.name. So this is not the name of the player, this is just the name of the string value. And we'll set that to be attacker with a capital A. Then we'll say attacker.parent. So this is where it's going to be located. And we're going to store that in the bullet. And then finally, we'll say attacker.value. And we're going to set the value equal to player.name. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the code and we'll check it out. So now if we shoot that bullet, we can see we have the script and the attacker tag. The way we're going to use this in our damage script, which we have in the server storage, is by adding another condition to this if statement. And what we're going to say is we're going to say and. So we're going to be looking for two things to happen: that the object is a humanoid, and that humanoid is not equal to the attacker. So the way we're going to write that is by saying humanoid.parent.name. So this will get the name of the player. And we want to make sure that's not equal. So we're going to use this symbol, which in most keyboards is in the top left-hand corner, and then the equal sign. And we want to make sure that's not equal to bullet.attacker.value. Oh, and let me just make sure I spell bullet correctly. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're making sure the object has a humanoid part, and the name of the object that we're hitting is not equal to the player's name who is shooting the bullet. So when I played the game, it ran into an issue. So it was a simple mistake. I just misspelled attacker. So let's go ahead and add that extra T, and we can try it again. So now if I shoot this NPC, the NPC takes damage, but I don't. If you want to, you can change the damage value. So if you want it to be one shot, one kill, then you would just change this part to 100. So now if I shoot the NPC, it only takes one shot to kill it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video here. In the next one, we're going to take a look at the leaderboard system and see how we can keep track of kills and also deaths. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In this video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by setting up a leaderboard system that keeps track of how many kills you make and how many times you die. Okay, so we're going to start off with the easy part, which is just setting up the leaderboards to display the kills and the deaths. And then we'll take a look at the harder part, which is keeping track of when a player kills someone and when that other person dies. Alright, so to start off with the leaderboards, we're going to start with a function. So we'll say local function. The name of our function is going to be onPlayerJoin. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass the parameter player. And then we're going to connect this function to the player added event by saying game.players.playerAdded. So this gets triggered whenever a player joins the game. We're going to say :connect. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to connect the function, which is onPlayerJoin. So now inside this function, we're going to set up a folder for the leaderstats. So we'll say local leaderstats. And this is going to be equal to instance.new. We're going to be creating a new folder. We're going to give this folder a name by saying leaderstats.name. And we'll just set this equal to leaderstats inside of quotation marks. Then we're going to say leaderstats dot parent, and we're going to set the parent equal to the player. After that, we're going to create the two different values that we're going to display. So one of those is going to be the kills, and the other is going to be the deaths. So to start with the kills, we'll say local kills. It's going to be equal to instance dot new. This time we're going to be creating an int value, so that'll be a number. We're going to say kills dot name will be equal to kills. Kills dot value will be equal to 0. And then kills dot parent will be equal to the folder, which is leaderstats. Next, we're going to say local deaths, and it's going to be equal to instance dot new. We're going to be creating another int value. We'll say deaths dot name. It's going to be equal to deaths. We'll set the value and also the parent. Okay, and that's all we have to do to set up the leader stats. That's going to display the value for kills and also deaths. So let's go ahead and check it out just to make sure it's set up correctly. Okay, and everything looks good. Up in the leader stats, I have a section for the kills and also a section for the deaths. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the part that's a little bit more tricky, which is keeping track of when a player kills someone and when the other player dies. So on the leaderboard script, we're going to create a section that's going to keep track of when a player dies in the game. So just to make this clear, we're going to make a comment that says death tracker. And then we're going to start with the player added event, just like we did right here. So we're going to start by saying game.players .player added :connect. And this time I'm going to define the function inside the parentheses by saying function. We're going to pass that same player variable. And then inside this function, we're going to be creating a couple smaller functions. For the first one, we're going to say player.character added. So this happens when the character gets added to the player. We're going to connect this. Inside the parentheses, we'll say function. Inside this function, we're going to pass the parameter character. So just like player came from the player added event, character comes from the character added event. So inside this one, what we're going to do is start with character, wait for child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put humanoid. So it's waiting for the humanoid object to load in. From here, we're going to say died. So this is when the humanoid dies. We're going to connect this with our final function. This function is not going to get any parameters, but what we're going to do inside of this is we're going to say player .leaderstats .deaths. After that, we're going to say .value, and this is going to be equal to the original value for it. And then we're going to say +1 at the end. Alright, so this part is not too bad, and I actually did a video very similar to this. So all this is doing, it's waiting for the player to join the game. It's waiting for the character to load in. From the character, it's waiting for the humanoid to load in. And then after that, it's just waiting for the player to die. When that player dies, it's going to access the deaths part of the leader stats and add 1 to it. So let's go ahead and load up a local server, and we can check to see if this is working. So currently I'm player 1, so if I kill this other player, I should expect for player 2 that for the deaths part of the leader stats, it should go up by 1. Okay, and it looks like it works. So the part that's a little bit tricky is we need to figure out who killed that player so that we can add 1 for the kills in that player's leader stats. The way we're going to do that is very similar to the way we did the attacker tag for the bullet. We're going to create a killer tag that will store with the player being killed, and then we'll use that information to give a kill to the player that killed that other player. So I know that was a mouthful, so let's just go and start working on it, and then it's going to become more clear. So we're going to say local killer is going to be equal to instance .new. Inside the parentheses, we're going to be creating a string value. We're going to say killer.name is equal to killer. And then finally, we'll say killer dot parent, and this is going to be equal to the player. All right, so before we get too much farther, I just want to run the code and check to make sure this part is working. Okay, so I'm going to check under the player section, and then for the player, so I have my killer tag. Right now, the value section is empty, but what I want to do is update that section with the name of the player that is shooting you. To do that, we're going to revisit the damage script. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple more lines that's going to update that value section with the player's name. First, we need to get the player's name. So we're going to start by saying local player is equal to game dot players, and then we're going to say colon find first child, and then inside the parentheses we're going to put humanoid dot parent dot name. To make sure we found it, we're going to say if player. Then what we're going to do next is locate the killer tag within the player. So we'll say local tag is equal to player colon find first child. And then here we're looking for the name of the tag, which is killer. Then we want to check to make sure we found the tag. So we'll say if tag. Then the reason we're doing all these extra checks is just to make sure the script doesn't break. Okay, so inside this if statement, we want to update the value for the tag. So we're going to say tag dot value, and this is going to be equal to bullet dot attacker dot value. So remember from before, we added a attacker value to the bullet that stores the name of the player that's shooting the bullet. So what we're doing here is we're updating the killer tag with the name of the attacker. So what we're going to do before we actually run the script is I'm going to lower the damage down so that we can just make sure that the value is getting updated. So for the damage, I'm just going to make it 10. So now let me go ahead and shoot player 2, and we'll see if my name pops up. Okay, and there we go. So for the value part for this tag, we have player 1, which is the player that shot player 2. Okay, so now we're back under the leaderboard script, which we have in the server script service. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that killer tag to update the kill section for the killer. To do that, we first need to create a variable for the killer. And we're going to do that by saying local killer. And this is going to be equal to game.players. Inside the players folder, we're going to say find first child. And then what we're looking for is we're going to start with the player who died. We're going to locate their killer tag, and then we're going to get the value from it. And then we'll say if killer. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say killer. And I actually don't want to use the same variable name as I used up here. So what I'm going to do instead is just add the word tag to this. And then we'll put tag here. And then we'll put tag here. So here, the killer tag, we're going to say dot leaderstats. Dot kills dot value, and that's going to be equal to the original value for it, and then we'll add +1 at the end. Alright, so let's go ahead and run the game and see if this works. Alright, so just like before, I'm player 1, so what I'm checking for when I kill this other player is that for player 2, the deaths go up by 1, and for player 1, the kills go up by 1. Alright, so let's go ahead and check it out and make sure it's working. Alright, so everything looks good. I got 1 kill for player 1, and then for player 2, they have a death. So let's go ahead and swap roles now. So I'm going to become player 2. And then we'll go ahead and kill player 1. Okay, and that worked as well. So player 2 now has 1 kill, and then player 1 has 1 death. Alright, so before we end with this video, we're just going to do a couple small things just to clean things up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is go under the damage script. And after the bullet has hit the player, we're going to go ahead and destroy the bullet by saying bullet, colon, and destroy. And the other line that we're going to add is going to be under bullet create. And down here toward the end, what we're going to say is game, colon, get service. The service that we're going to be getting is debris. And then we're going to say colon, add item. We're going to be adding the bullet. And we want to clean these up after 2 seconds. So debris is kind of like a garbage cleanup system. So whatever items you add to it, like the bullets we're adding right here, it's going to remove all those bullets after 2 seconds. You can play around with the time of this if you want to. I wouldn't recommend making it too small, because then you might remove the bullet before it actually hits the player. So now when you're in the game and you shoot the bullets, you'll see that they pop up in the workspace, but then after 2 seconds, they get removed. So it's just a nice way of keeping things clean so you don't have a bunch of random parts in your game. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. If you have any other ideas of what you want to see for our first-person shooter series, go ahead and leave me a comment. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by adding some new things to it. The first thing that we're going to add is a reload system, so that you get 10 bullets to shoot. And then once you shoot off those 10 bullets, you can no longer fire the gun. If you press the letter R, you can reload the gun. And then once you reload the gun, then you can shoot again. Another thing that we're going to add is a click to zoom in, and we're going to be using the right part of the mouse to do this. So whenever the user clicks down on the right part of the mouse, it's going to zoom in. And then as soon as they release that, it's going to zoom out. And finally, we're going to update the mouse icon to the one you see on the screen. Alright, so let's go ahead and start by what we're going to add to the gun itself, and then we'll take a look at what we have to update on the scripts. So for the gun, I went ahead and put this in the starter pack so that the player starts with it as soon as they enter the game. And then what we're going to be adding to this is a few different things. So the first thing that I want you to add is a int value. So to do that, if you click on your gun, and then click on the plus sign, we're going to be adding an int value. So you can just search int, and it should come up. And you're going to go ahead and select it right here. After that, you're going to rename it to ammo, and make sure you use a capital A. Go ahead and open up your int value, and for the value section, this is going to be the amount of bullets you want to set for your gun. So for the handgun, I set it at 10. But if you have a gun that you want to hold more ammo, you can increase that. But if you have some type of either sniper or shotgun, then you probably want to use a lower value. Okay, and the other things that we're going to be adding are different sounds for the reload and also for the empty clip. And all those you can find in the toolbox. If you look under the audio section, you can search for different things like reload, empty clip, empty magazine, and then just choose whatever sounds you like the best. So just as an example, let's say I found this reload sound that I really like. Then the way you're going to insert it into the gun is first click on the handle part to select that part over on the gun. And then you're going to go back to the sound and click on it. And it should insert it right inside that part. And you're going to do the same thing for the empty clip or the empty magazine sound. Just go ahead and click on the handle first, and then click on the sound. One thing you might want to do with your sounds is increase the volume. So let's say for the reload sound, it was too quiet to hear. Then what you can do is you can click on it, and then go down under the properties menu. And then for the volume, you can set it to the highest value by setting it equal to 1. Once you get your int value that you're going to call ammo, and you set the value equal to the number of bullets you want for your gun, and also once you get the sounds for your gun, we can move on to the script. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start on the local script that should be inside of the gun. This script may look a little bit different than where we left off last time, but the only changes I made was adding comments to kind of separate different sections, but I didn't actually change any of the code. So all these green sections you see here are not actually lines of code, they're just comments that you can use to separate out different chunks of code. So this first section right here I called object and sound variables, and that includes the variable for the gun, and also for our gun sound. So right now the gun sound is just the sound the gun makes whenever the bullet gets fired, but we're going to go ahead and add our other two sounds now. One for the reload and one for the empty clip. To add the other sounds, we're just going to make variables for them. So let's go ahead and start by saying local, empty, underscore sound is going to be equal to gun, dot handle, dot the name of the sound, which in our case is clip, underscore empty. If you're using different sounds than the ones I'm using, then you have two different options for how you can update the code. You can either update this line right here with the name of your sound, or if you want to follow along exactly with this video, then what you can do is go over to the sounds over in the Explorer menu and rename it to exactly what I have. So for whatever sound you want for your empty magazine, rename that one to clip underscore empty. If you feel comfortable just renaming it on the script side, then you can just update this here with whatever name you see over here. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a variable for the reload sound. So we'll say local, reload, underscore sound. And this is going to be equal to the same thing. We'll say gun dot handle, and then dot the name of the sound. So in our case, it's going to be reload. And that's all we have to do for the sounds. So let's go ahead and figure out where we're going to play these sounds. So we're going to go ahead and locate the section of code right here. And this is the section of code that plays our gun sound and also triggers the remote event. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that ammo value that we created for our gun. And basically what we're going to be doing is checking to make sure that the ammo is greater than 0. If it is, then we'll go ahead and do this section of code. And if it's not greater than 0, which would mean the gun's out of bullets, then we'll do some other section of code. The way that's going to look in code is we're going to start with an if statement. So we want to check to make sure that the ammo's value is greater than 0. So we're going to say if gun.ammo.value, and we want to check to make sure that's greater than 0. And if that's true, then what we're going to do is play the gun sound and trigger the remote event. And then we're going to make an else statement. So we'll say else. And for the else statement, it's going to run whenever this statement is not true. So if the gun's ammo is not greater than 0, then it's going to go down to the else statement. So for the else statement, let's go ahead and play our empty sound by saying empty underscore sound, and then colon and play. Okay, so all we did so far is divide the section into 2 parts. If the gun's ammo is greater than 0, then we're going to run this section of code right here. Otherwise, we're going to run this section right here. So we're either going to fire a bullet and play the gunshot sound, or we're going to play the empty sound. All right, so let's go and run the code and we'll take a look. All right, so I'm going to start by shooting off my 10 bullets. Okay, so that's 10 bullets. So for the next one, I shouldn't create a bullet. I should just hear that empty clip sound. And you can see when I try to shoot that no bullets are created. And it may be hard to hear, but there is that other sound playing. All right, so let's go ahead and continue now and work on our reload system. Okay, so for our reload system, we're going to be using the user input service to check to see if the player presses the letter R, and then we'll give them a fresh round of bullets. So to do that, I'm going to start under the section I called user input setup, and this is just directly below the objects and sounds. So the first thing we're going to put in this section is a variable for the user input service. So we'll say local user input. This is going to be equal to game :get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put user input service. After that, we're going to scroll down to the bottom. And the next section that we're going to write is right below the one that we just worked on. So for this section right here, it's going to check to see if the letter R was pressed, and then it's going to give the player new bullets. To do that, we're going to start with user input. So this is storing the user input service. And then we're going to say dot and input began. Then we're going to connect a function to this. So inside the parentheses, we're going to say function. Inside the functions parentheses, we're going to pass the parameters input and also game processed. Inside this function, we're going to start by saying if not game processed. Inside this if statement, we're going to say if input. So this is the input that gets recorded by the user input service. And then we're going to say dot user input type. So this will check the type of input. And we want to check to see if that's equal to enum dot user input type. And then we're going to say dot keyboard to check for a key press. So if some key on the keyboard was pressed, we want to check to see which one it was. So we'll do that by saying local key code. And this is going to be equal to input dot key code. And then here we're going to check to see which key was pressed by saying if key code was equal to enum dot key code dot R. And if you want to use a different letter for your reload, you'll go ahead and put that there. So if it was the letter R, then what we're going to do is we're going to play the reload sound and then set the gun's ammo back to 10. So first we're going to play the sound. So we'll say reload, _sound, :play. And then I'm going to wait until the sound is done before I give them the ammo. So to do that, I'll say reload, _sound, .ended. And then I'll say : wait. So this is going to wait for the sound to finish. For my sound, I believe it's a couple seconds, so this can be used as your reload time. So after the sound has finished, then what I'm going to do is say gun.ammo.value is going to be equal to 10. Okay, so quickly let's go through this one more time. So what this is doing first is waiting for some type of input. Once that input is detected, then it's going to check to make sure that the input came from the keyboard. If it came from the keyboard, then it's going to check to see which key was pressed. If the letter R was pressed, then it's going to play the sound, wait for it to finish, and then reload the ammo. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look and see how this works. Alright, so I'm going to start by shooting off my 10 bullets. Okay, and now I should have no bullets shooting. Okay, so that part's good. So now I'm going to press the R key. Okay, so the reload sound played, and then now I can shoot more bullets. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is updating the mouse cursor. Okay, so to update the mouse cursor, the first thing we're going to do is open up the toolbox. Make sure you go to the images section, and then you can search for whatever type of cursor you want to have. I searched for cross cursor, and there's a couple different ones that you can try out. To actually use one of these cursors in the game, what you want to do is right click on the one that you want to use, and then click on the last one that says copy, asset, and then URI. And then for now, we can just go ahead and paste it somewhere on the script. We're going to be adding a little bit more to this in just a second, but for now, we're going to start by saying local mouse is equal to game.players.localPlayer, and then we're going to say : get mouse. Next, in front of our ID, we're going to add mouse dot icon with a capital I, and we're going to set that equal to the ID. And finally, we just need to add this ID inside of quotation marks. Alright, so let's go and run the game with this new icon, and then we'll try some other ones in the toolbox over here. Alright, and once you're in the game, you can see the new mouse icon. Alright, just for fun, let's go and try out a couple different ones. Let's go and try out this one right here. So to update it, go ahead and right click. You're going to click on the last one that says copy asset URI. You're going to select this old ID, and then paste in the new one. Alright, so let's go and try out that one and see how it looks. Alright, and this is what the new one looks like. For me, this is a little bit hard to see, but you're welcome to use whichever image you want to. Alright, so for the final update for this video, let's go ahead and add a section to the code so that when the user right-clicks on the mouse, it zooms in a little bit, and then when they release that part of the mouse, it zooms back out. Okay, so the zoom in and zoom out is going to be part of this section right here, the gun equip section. To make it so that whenever the user clicks on the right part of the mouse, it zooms in, what we're going to do is start with the mouse object, and then we're going to say dot, and then button 2. So button 1 is the left part of the mouse, button 2 is the right part. We're going to say button 2 dot down, and then we're going to connect this with a function. Inside this function, we're going to make a variable for the camera. So we'll say local camera is equal to game.workspace.current camera. So this is the camera for the user. And then we're going to say camera dot field of view. The default is 70. So if you set it to something less than 70, it's going to zoom in. If you set it to something greater than 70, it would look like it's zooming out. So let's go ahead and say equal to and 40. And this is a number that you can play around with depending on how much zoom you want to get. For the zoom out part, it's going to be very similar, but instead of button 2 down, we're going to write something for button 2 up. Let's go ahead and just copy this section. Here we're going to say button 2 up. And then for this part, we're going to change the field of view back to the default, which is 70. All right, so let's go ahead and run the code and see how this looks. Okay, so once you're in the game, if you click down on the right part of the mouse, you'll zoom in some, and then when you release it, you'll zoom back out. And before we finish with this video, we're just going to fix one more thing. So this really isn't an update or a new feature, it's just a fix for something we worked on last time. So let me go ahead and start by shooting a bullet. And we can see if I'm facing this direction, it looks like the bullets shoot pretty straight. But if I turn this way, it looks like the bullets are shooting sideways. So what we're going to do is just update that really quickly so that no matter what direction I'm facing, it always looks like it's shooting straight. So to fix this is actually not too bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass one additional piece of information to the server. And for that, we're going to say gun.handle.orientation. And then on the bullet create script, we're going to receive that extra piece of information as another parameter. So for the name of it, I'm just going to say gun, and then OR for orientation. And then down here for bullet.orientation, we're going to take the current orientation, which is stored in gun, OR, and then we're going to add that correction vector. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look now and see how it looks. Okay, so I'll start this direction. So the bullets are shooting straight, and then I'm going to turn to the left. And we can see that no matter what direction I'm facing, they always shoot forward. All right, so that's going to be it for this video. I know there's still a couple more updates that I need to do based on comments on the previous video. But if you guys have any more suggestions, please leave those in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by adding a couple GUI elements. The first thing we're going to work on in this video is the ammo GUI you see in the bottom right-hand corner. And then next, we'll take a look at the health part. So with this ammo GUI, every time I click to fire a bullet, it keeps track of how many bullets I have left. And it also keeps track of the total number of bullets I have. So in this case, I have 15 bullets total. When I reload, it gives me a new round of ammo for my gun and also updates the amount of bullets I have total. Alright, so let's go ahead and start by making the GUI for our ammo. To do that, you want to go under the starter GUI. Inside that folder, you're going to add a screen GUI. And then inside the screen GUI, you're going to add a text label. Once you add that text label, go ahead and rename it to ammo. And I just want to note here that this label is not inside of this frame. It's directly inside the screen GUI. Alright, after you create the text label, you can go ahead and customize it to look however you want to. All I did for mine was make a few small changes. So I changed the background color to a light gray. And then for the text, it doesn't really matter what you have to start with because we're going to be changing it with code. So in the beginning, I just set it to ammo, but you're not actually going to see that because once the code runs, it's going to automatically change it. Okay, so once you make all the appearance changes that you want to do, we're actually going to change the visibility equal to false by unchecking this box here. And then on the script, whenever the player equips a tool, that's when we're going to make the GUI appear. Alright, so let's go ahead and head over to the script and see what we have to do. Okay, so on the script, this is the local script that's inside the gun. So wherever you have your gun, this is the script I'm talking about right here. So what we're going to do first is under the section that we have for objects and sound variables, we're going to create a couple more variables. So the first variable that we're going to create is a variable for the player. So we're going to say local player. And this is going to be equal to game.players and then .local player. Next, we're going to create a variable for the clip size. So we'll say local clip size. And this is going to be equal to 10. So this number right here should match the amount you set for ammo. So whatever value you put here, just put the same thing right here as well. What you can do just to make it a little bit easier is you can say gun.ammo.value. So that way, if you ever change the value of the ammo in the future, it's going to automatically change it here as well. So the first thing we're going to do for this GUI is make it so that when the player equips the weapon, it's going to show up. And then when they unequip the weapon, it's going to disappear. So to do that, we're going to start under this section right here. And this is the section where we define what happens when the gun gets equipped. And what we're going to do is inside of this function right here, we're going to say player.playerGUI. And then we're going to access the screen GUI. And then inside the screen GUI, we're going to be accessing the ammo label. So we'll say .ammo. And then to make it visible, we're going to say .visible. And we're going to set that equal to true. Okay, so it's important to note here, if you're using other screen GUIs, then you probably want to rename this to something unique. Otherwise, it's going to get confused if you have multiple screen GUIs with the same name. Alright, so let's go ahead and test this out and see if when I equip the weapon, the GUI appears. Okay, so right now I can see in the bottom right hand corner that the ammo GUI is not there. So let's go ahead and try equipping the gun and see if it shows up. Okay, so I equipped the gun and it looks like it has not shown up yet. So let's take a look at the output and see what the issue is. And so here it says ammo is not a valid member of tool. And if I click on this right here, it shows me where the error appears. So the error appears on this line right here. And what might be happening is it's not giving enough time for this ammo value to load in. So what we can try to do to fix that is use a wait for child. So here on the script, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say gun, and then I'm going to say : wait for child. And then inside the parentheses, I'm going to put ammo inside of quotation marks. And then on the outside, we'll still have dot and value. Alright, so let's go ahead and try it now and see if that fixes the issue. Okay, so now when I equip the gun, the ammo GUI appears. So it seemed like that was the issue. The ammo value wasn't actually loaded in yet. So when I got to that line of code and tried to find that value that wasn't there yet, it kind of broke the script. So now that we have that part working, the next thing we want to do is have it so that whenever the player unequips the tool, the GUI disappears again. So just like we have a function that runs whenever the tool gets equipped, this one right here, we're going to create another function that'll run whenever the tool gets unequipped. And we're just going to put that right below. So if you want to, you can create a section called unequip gun, and this is where we're going to put that function. So we're going to start with gun, and then this time we're going to say dot and unequip, and then we're going to connect this with a function. And then for this function, what we're going to do is start with player. We're going to access the player GUI, then the screen GUI, and then the ammo label. And then here we're going to say dot visible. And to make it invisible again, we're just going to set that equal to false. Alright, so let's go ahead and test this out. Okay, so when my player equips the gun, the GUI appears, and when the player unequips the gun, it disappears. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is going to be displaying the amount of ammo we have on the GUI. So on the script, we want to update this GUI whenever the value for the ammo changes. So whenever the player shoots the gun, the ammo value is going to change, and that's when we want to update the GUI. So to do that, we're going to say gun.ammo. And if you notice, I tried this before and it ran into an issue. So to prevent that issue from happening again, what I'm going to do is up here at the top, I'm going to define one more variable. So I'm going to say local ammo, and this is going to be equal to gun, : wait for child, and then here I'm going to be waiting for the ammo value. So now down here, instead of saying gun.ammo, I can just directly start with ammo. And this ammo right here is referring to the variable I created up here. So this is taking the gun and waiting for the ammo to load in. And the reason I'm doing that, like I mentioned before, is just to give it a chance to load in before we try to access it. So what I'm going to do is say ammo.changed. So this event gets triggered whenever the value changes. Okay, so once the value changes when the player shoots the gun, we're going to say : and connect. And we're going to connect this with a function. And inside this function, we're going to access the GUI by saying player.player GUI .screen GUI .ammo, and then we're going to be changing the text. And then what we want to set for the text is the word ammo. I'm going to put a : and then a space. And then I want to join that with some additional information. So I'm going to say dot. And then what I want to add to this is the value for the gun ammo, which is going to be ammo.value. And then I need to convert this into a string so that I can combine it with this other string. So to do that, I'm just going to say toString, and then put it inside of parentheses. So I need to add this line of code to one more spot in the script, because when the player first equips the gun, I want it to show the actual amount of ammo. So I'm going to copy this line, and then the spot I need to add it is right inside of this function right here for the gun equipped. So right below this line, I'm just going to paste what we have. So let's go ahead and run the code, and we'll check it out. Okay, so when I equip the weapon, the GUI appears now, and it appears with our updated text, which says ammo and the value for the ammo. And then whenever I shoot my weapon, you see it subtracts 1 for the ammo, and it updates it with the current ammo. And the nice thing of using the .changed event is I don't have to do anything for the reload, because whenever I press R for reload, it's going to change the ammo value, and that's automatically going to update the GUI as well. So now that we have that working, the next thing we're going to do is update this GUI to show the total amount of bullets I have for this gun. So to display the total amount of ammo we have for this weapon, we're going to start by creating another int value for our gun. So go ahead and insert another int value into the gun, and then you're going to rename this one to max ammo. You can click on your max ammo int value, and for this value section, it's going to be the total amount of bullets you want for your gun. So I'm just keeping it at 15 for now, just for testing purposes, but you can make this as large as you want to. So after you insert that int value and rename it to max ammo, and also set your value for it, we're going to head back to the script. And the first thing we're going to do is head back to the bottom where we have this section right here. And we're going to be adding some more information to this. So we're going to say ... and we're going to be adding a /. So what I'm going to do is inside the quotation marks, I'm going to put a space. I'll put the /, and then another space. Outside the quotation marks, I'm going to put 2 more dots. And then what we're going to be joining to this is gun.maxammo.value. If you want to, you can convert this into a variable like we did for the ammo. But while I was testing it, I didn't run into any issues. So I'm just going to keep it like this for now. If you're running into some issues like we saw before, then you may want to update it to this version right here. Okay, so once we have this value, we still need to convert it into a string. So what we're going to do is say toString, and then put that inside of parentheses. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and then paste it in the same spot we have above. So I'm just going to replace the old line with the new one. And let's go and test it out now and see if it's working. Okay, so now when I equip the gun, I see I have my clip size, which is 10, out of the total size, which is 15. The last thing we need to do for this ammo GUI is update the logic in this section right here. So the first thing we want to do is we only want to reload the gun if the current value for ammo is less than the clip size. So for example, if the player fires 2 bullets, they're going to have 8 bullets, and that's less than the clip size, which is 10. So in that case, if they press R, we can reload their clip for them. But if they have 10 bullets and the clip size is also 10, then in that case, we don't want to reload the gun. So to do that, we're going to say if gun.ammo.value, and we want to check to make sure that's less than clip size. So we're going to say less than and clip size. In addition to it being less than clip size, we also need max ammo to be greater than 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to say and gun.maxammo.value, and we want that to be greater than 0. So obviously we can't reload the gun if we don't have any more bullets. So if those two conditions are met, if my current ammo is less than the clip size, and I also have some bullets to work with, then I'll go ahead and reload the gun. So what I need to do is just add an end to this if statement, and then add the word then right here. So the next thing that we need to check for is to see if the gun has enough bullets to reload the clip completely, or if we need to give the player a partial clip. So to do that, we're going to start with an if statement, and this if statement is going to say if gun.maxammo.value, and then what we're checking for is if we subtract this from clip size minus gun.ammo.value, and we want to make sure that this value is greater than or equal to 0. Let me go and stop and explain what's going on here. So in our case, clip size is equal to 10, and gun.ammo.value is equal to the current amount of ammo they have left in their clip. So as an example, let's say the player has 7 bullets left in their gun. Our clip size is equal to 10, so 10 minus 7 is going to be equal to 3, which is the amount of bullets we need to give the player to reload their clip. And what we're checking for is to make sure that we have 3 bullets left in the total amount of bullets we have for our gun. So if that's the case, then we have enough bullets to refill their clip. Then what we're going to do, and I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this line right here because we're going to change it to something else. So inside the statement here, we're going to say gun dot max ammo dot value is going to be equal to the current value for the max ammo. And then what we're going to do is subtract the amount of bullets that we give the player. And that is this statement right here. So clip size minus the current amount of bullets they have in their clip. And then to give them a refilled clip, what we're going to do is say gun.ammo.value. And we're going to set that equal to clip size. So this section right here is going to happen whenever we have enough total bullets to give the player a full clip. The other case would be if we're running low on ammo and we're not able to completely refill the clip, then we're just going to give a partial refill. And what we're going to do in this case is we're going to say gun.ammo.value. And this is going to be equal to the current value. And what we're going to do is just fill up the clip with whatever remaining bullets we have. So the remaining bullets that we have is going to be stored under game.maxammo.value. Since we're giving them the remaining bullets, we're going to say gun.maxammo.value. And we're going to set this equal to 0. And then since this value is changing after the ammo value, what we need to do is copy the sign right here and paste it down below here. All right, so let's go and run the code now and we can take a look. All right, so what I'm going to do first is just fire 1 bullet. So now I have 9 bullets left in my clip. And when I press the reload button, it took 1 from my max ammo and put it inside my clip. If I try to reload with a full clip, then nothing happens. And now let me go and fire off some bullets. So when I have 0, it's going to give me a full round. And now what I'm going to do is get down to 2 bullets. And now you can see that my remaining bullets is equal to 4. So the best I can do is take those 4 bullets and insert it into my clip to give me 6. And that would be the case for our else statement. So whenever it gets to that case where I don't have enough bullets here to give me a full new clip, then that's what the else statement is for. If I do have enough for a full clip, that gets handled by this section right here. So let me go ahead and reload the gun and I'll show you what happens. Okay, so when I reload my clip, it's going to give me the remaining bullets. So now it's going to say 5 because I shot off an extra bullet by accident. And now for the total bullets, it's equal to 0. So now if I don't have any more bullets and I try to reload, nothing happens. Alright, so this video seems like it's getting kind of long, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here for now. In this video, we set up the ammo GUI. In upcoming videos, we're going to set up the health bar. And we're also going to take a look at some different ways that we can refill our ammo over here. So for now, I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In this video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by adding a health bar that you see in the bottom left-hand corner. And what I'm going to do first is to show you how this is going to look in the game. Okay, so when I shoot this player, you can see that the other player's health GUI goes down, and this corresponds with the player's current health. So if I continue to shoot the player, it goes down, and then because of the health regeneration, you can see it slowly going back up. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started by creating the GUI, and then we'll take a look at the script for it. So this is one that I created before, but the process for making it is you're going to start under Screen GUI. You're going to click on the plus sign to add a frame. Go ahead and resize the frame to whatever size you want. Down here for the properties, I located the style section. And then I changed it from custom to drop shadow. And then inside this frame, you're going to be adding a text label. Go ahead and rename that text label to health. And then you can make some appearance changes to it. So what I did for mine is I changed the background color. So I started with this bright red and just added a little bit more white to it. And then down here for the text, I changed it to 100. I increased the text size a little bit. And then for the text color, I changed it to white. Okay, so these are all optional changes, and you can make it look however you want to. But what you're going to do is resize this text label to fit inside your frame. So something like that. And then at this point, you probably want to use some type of plugin to scale the GUI. So I'm using the Auto Scale GUI, which I'll leave a link for in the description. If I forget to put the link, just go ahead and remind me though. So what you can do with this plugin is you can click on the different GUI elements. So we'll start with the frame. We'll go to the plugin section, and then for the size, we're going to scale it. And then for the text label, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to go to plugins and then press scale. And you may notice for the one I created before, the health label is not the same size as the frame. And this is something you might need to adjust just depending on how it looks in the game. And I noticed for my game that I needed to offset it a little bit so that it looked correct. So what we'll do for now is I'll just go ahead and run the game, and we'll take a look and see how it looks. Okay, so everything looks good so far, so let's go ahead and start working on the script. Okay, so now we're going to start working on the scripting for this. So under the text label that we renamed to health, go ahead and click on the plus sign. And then we're going to be adding a local script. The first thing we're going to do inside the script is create a variable for the player. So we'll say local player is equal to game.players.localPlayer. Then we're going to make a variable for the health label, and we'll say local health underscore label. And this is going to be equal to script.parent. Next, we're going to create a while loop to constantly update the label. So we're going to say while, wait, and then we're going to say do. So inside this loop, what we're going to do first is say local %, and this is going to be equal to player dot character dot humanoid dot health, and we're going to divide that by player dot character dot humanoid dot max health. So what this is doing, it's going to take the player's current health and divide it by the maximum health, and by doing that, it's going to give us a decimal that we can use as a percentage. So just as an example, let's say the player's health is equal to 75, then it's going to do 75 divided by 100. So as a decimal, that's going to be 0.75, and as a percent, that's going to be 75%. So the way we're going to use that is we're going to resize the health label to 75% of its current size. So to resize the label, what we're going to do is say health underscore label, and then we're going to say dot size, and we're going to set the size equal to udim2 dot new, and then here it's going to take 4 different numbers. The first one is going to be the X scale, the second one is going to be the X offset, the third one is going to be the Y scale, and the fourth one is going to be the Y offset. So for the X scale, we want to set that equal to the percent. For the X offset, we're going to set that equal to 0. For the Y scale, we're going to keep that at 1. And then for the Y offset, we're going to keep that equal to 0. So keep in mind, once we test this out, we may have to change some of these numbers, just depending on how the GUI looks. So in addition to changing the size, we also want to update the text on the label. So we're going to say health underscore label dot text, and this is going to be equal to player dot character dot humanoid dot health. And you may notice that we're using the same string quite a bit, so if you want to, you can convert this into a variable and put it up top here. I'm just going to keep it like this so that you understand what each part is referring to. So what we're doing is we're setting the label's text equal to the player's current health, and what we want to do is just round that down to the nearest integer, otherwise we're going to get decimals. So to round this down, what we're going to do is say math.floor. And then we're going to put this inside the parentheses. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the script so far, and we'll see if we need to make any changes. Okay, and you can see once I'm in the game, the GUI is messed up a little bit because of the script. So let's go ahead and take a look and see how we can fix this. So the first thing I'm going to do is for the Y scale, I'm going to change that to a smaller number. So let's try 0.8. So that looks a little bit better. It's fitting inside the frame nicer. So what I need to do now is just make some changes to the X scale. So this part right here is the X scale. So since it's a little bit too long, let's go ahead and try subtracting a small number. So let's try minus and then 0.1. Okay, so now the whole thing's inside the frame, but it looks like it's a little bit too much. It can be probably a little bit longer. So let's change it from 0.1 to 0.05. Okay, and that's getting really close. I think I can make it just a tad bit smaller. So what I'm going to try next is 0.03. Okay, so that looks good. So it fits inside the frame going left to right and also up and down. So that's one way that you can change the size of it. You can also do it manually like I did here. So what I did in this case is just make the whole thing a little bit smaller so that when it loads into the game, it fits inside the frame. I would probably recommend changing it on the script side, but you also have the option of changing it manually too. So the last thing we're going to do before we end with this video is just run a test server so that we can make sure that this value right here is updating with the current health. Okay, so let's go ahead and test now. I'm going to shoot this other player and we'll see if the value updates with the health. And we can see as soon as the player is shot, then the value gets updated to the player's current health. Alright, and before we end with this video, I'm just going to show you one more thing you can add to your health bar if you want to. So what you can do is you can color code your health. So for example, 70, it's going to be orange. As soon as it gets back to 75%, it's going to turn back to green. And then if it's less than 10%, which I'm not sure if I can get to. So let me let it load up a little bit and then I'll shoot them again. And here you can see if it gets less than 10%, the color turns red. So if you want to add this is what the script is going to look like. So we're going to add 3 if statements. And basically we're just going to be checking for the percentage to be within different ranges. So here the first one says if percent is less than 0.1. So this is for low health. So what you're going to do is set the background color of the health label equal to the color red, which is 255 for this value right here. If the player's health is between 10% and 75%, then I'm going to set it to an orange color by setting it to these values here. And then if it's greater than 75%, then I'm going to change it to green by setting 255 for the green value right here. So you can adjust these ranges to whatever you want to, and you can also change the colors to whatever you want to as well. For now though, we're going to go ahead and end with this video. Go ahead and leave me some comments of what you want to see next for the series. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by adding a couple optional scripts. So if there's anything in this video that you don't want to add, it's not going to be a big deal and won't affect the game going forward. So what we're going to add in this video is shift to sprint and also the ability to see your hand when you have the gun. So that's what it's going to look like for your hand. And then for shift to sprint, you can just press the shift button to go faster. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So the 2 scripts we're going to work on today are going to be a shift to sprint and something that makes the arms appear. Both those scripts are going to be in the starter player scripts, and I renamed them to sprint and arms just to keep them separated. We're going to go ahead and start with the shift to sprint. So for this script, we're going to start by making a variable for the user input service. So we're going to say local user input, and this is going to be equal to game : get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put user input service. After that, we're going to make a variable for the local player. So we'll say local player, and this is going to be equal to game.players.localPlayer. Then we're going to define 2 variables. One is going to be the sprint speed, and the other one is going to be the walk speed. So we'll say local sprint speed. This is going to be equal to whatever value you want for the sprint speed. So the default is 16, so we're just going to choose something bigger than 16. I'm going to try 30. And then we're going to define another one for the walk speed, so we'll say local walk speed. And this is going to be equal to the default, which is 16. Next, we're going to be making 2 different functions, one for when the shift key is being pressed, and one for when the shift key is being released. So we'll start by saying local function. The name of this function is going to be begin sprint. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass 2 different parameters. We're going to put input and also game processed. Inside this function, we're going to start by saying if not game processed. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say if input dot user input And we're going to say if this is equal to enum dot user input type dot keyboard. So what this line right here is doing, it's checking to see whatever input was received. It's checking to make sure that was from the keyboard. If it was from the keyboard, then we need to check which key was pressed. And we'll do that by saying local key code. And this is going to be equal to input dot key code. We'll say if key code is equal to enum dot key code. So all enum means is just choosing from a list. So there's a bunch of different key codes. So by saying enum.keycode, it's basically just pulling it from the list. And then from the list, we can just say whichever key we want to check for. We're going to be checking for left shift. So I'm going to say dot and then left shift. Okay, so if we have a left shift being pressed, then what we're going to do is say player.character.humanoid walk speed, and we're going to set that equal to our sprint speed. Okay, so since the next part is going to be very similar to this function, let's go ahead and just copy it, and we'll paste it down below. So now instead of begin sprint, we'll just change it to end sprint. And then here, instead of setting it to the sprint speed, we're going to change it to the walk speed. And finally, down here at the bottom, we want to connect these two different functions to the events. So we'll say user input dot input began. We're going to connect this with our first function, which is called begin sprint. And then finally, we'll say user input dot input ended connect. And here we're going to connect this one with end sprint. Alright, and that should be it. So let's go and run the game and we'll check it out. Alright, so now that I'm in the game, I'll go ahead and check it out. So if I press shift, I notice that it's not working. So let's go and check out the output. So here it says user input is not a valid member of input object. So it's happening on this line right here. Oh, so right here, this should be user input type. And let's go and change it up top too. Alright, so let's go and run it again and see if that fixes it. Alright, so now if I press the shift button, it sprints, and as soon as I release, it goes back to the normal walk speed. Alright, before we get started with the arms, I just want to give you a fair warning that it's not perfect, and there's still a few things I need to work on. This was one of the easier methods I found to do this. Most of the other methods involve creating an extra pair of arms and then attaching it to the body. I will attach that article if you want to take a look at it. So if you take a look at this article here, the process that looks a little bit better involves making an extra pair of arms and then attaching it to the body. So if you want to read through this and kind of do it that way, you're welcome to. I'm just going to show you the easier method for now, and then I'll continue to work on making it better. So the one we have now looks like this, so it's not too bad. One issue though, if you look down, the arm kind of looks disconnected from the body, so that's one thing I still need to work on. So in general, what I want to work on is making the gun follow the mouse instead of just the head. But for now, I'll show you what I have, and you can decide if you want to add it or not. Okay, so this script is also going to be in the starter player scripts. For this script, we're going to start by saying local player, and this is going to be equal to game.players.localPlayer. Next, we'll say local model, and this is going to be equal to game.workspace. And then we're going to say wait for child, and then what we're looking for is player.name. This will get the player's model in the workspace so that we can take different things like their arm and their hand. What we're going to do next is create a couple variables for some different body parts that we want to show. So first we're going to say local right lower. So this is going to be the lower right arm. And this is going to be equal to model find first child. And then what we're looking for is right lower arm. I'm just going to copy this 2 more times and we'll change what we need to. So the next one is going to be the upper part of the arm. So here we'll say right upper arm. And then the last thing is going to be the hand. So we'll put hand here. And on this side, we'll say right hand. After that, we're going to say game, get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put run service. And then we're going to say dot render stepped. Then we're going to say connect. And then we're going to connect this with a function. Inside this function, we're going to start by saying right, and then lower. We're going to say dot, and then local, transparency. And then after transparency, it's going to be modifier. And we're going to set this equal to 0. So what this local transparency modifier does is when you're zoomed into first person all the way, it makes any body parts invisible. So by setting the transparency modifier equal to 0, it kind of overrides that and makes it visible. And the reason we have to do this, the render stepped, is so that it renders it for each frame of the game. Alright, so let's just go and copy this 2 more times and we'll make the changes that we need to make. So here we're going to say right upper. And for the last one, it's going to be right hand. Alright, and that should be it. So let's go ahead and check it out and make sure it works. Okay, and you can see when I zoom in, I can see my hand, my lower arm, and my upper arm. And like I mentioned before, if you look all the way down, it's disconnected. But for now, I think it's a decent start, and I can work on fixing the other issues. And just to give you a better idea of how this works, I removed the upper arm and the lower arm. And if we run the code now, we should just see the hand. So now we can just see the hand. So whatever body parts you mention are the ones that are going to show up. If you want to see the other arm, then you can make variables for the left hand, the left upper arm, and left lower arm, and then it would show up too. For now, I'm just going to keep the right hand since the player has a handgun. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. These were just a couple optional scripts that you can add to your game if you want to. In the next video, we're going to take a look and see how we can drop ammo out of a player that dies. So I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue to work on our first-person shooter by adding an ammo drop whenever the player dies. Alright, so this is how it's going to look. So whenever this player dies, they're going to drop this part. And don't worry about how it looks now, we can always make it look however we want to. But this part right here, when another player goes over it, it gives them more ammo. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start on the local script that's inside the gun. The first thing we're going to do on the script is not going to be directly related to the ammo drop, but what we're going to do is make a function that'll update the ammo GUI. So basically it's going to do this line right here. So rather than having that long line in a couple different spots in the game, we're just going to make a function to do it, and then we can just use the function to update it later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another section right here. I'm just going to call this update ammo function. And for this function, we're just going to say local function. The name of it can be update ammo. And we're just going to put this line inside right here. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it. And now what we can do, anytime we have this line right here, we can replace that line with the function name, which is update underscore ammo. And the way we're going to change this one down here at the bottom is we're going to get rid of all this stuff. And then inside the parentheses here, we're just going to put the function's name. We're going to come back to the script later on, but for now, we're going to head over to the leaderboard script. Okay, so on this script, what we're going to do is create a function that's going to create that block whenever the player dies. So let's go ahead and just make a section right above the death tracker. And we can just call this ammo drop. For this function, we're going to say local function. The name of the function can be drop underscore ammo. This function is going to take in a parameter we're going to call death position. Don't worry about this part right now. We're going to define this variable later on. So inside this function, we're going to start by waiting for 1 second. After that, we're going to say local ammo. It's going to be equal to instance dot new. Inside the parentheses, we're going to be creating a new part. Next, we're going to say ammo dot parent. And we're going to set this equal to game.workspace. We'll say ammo.position is going to be equal to the death position. Then we're going to say ammo.name. For the name, we get to say ammo drop. And that's all we're going to add for now. Later on, we're going to be writing a script that we're going to be attaching to this part. But for now, we'll just go ahead and move on, and then we'll add that script later on. Okay, so we're going to add a line to the death tracker right here. So remember, this keeps track of when the player dies. So this would be a good spot to put our function call. So what we're going to do inside this function is just make another line. So we can just write it right here. And what we want to do is call the function, which just means run the function. So we're going to say drop underscore ammo. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put the player's position when they die. And that position is going to be stored in death underscore position. Okay, so the player's position is going to be equal to character dot humanoid root part. And then off the humanoid root part, we want to get the position, which is going to be dot, and then position. And I just noticed that we don't want to add this line right here. We want to add it inside of this function right here, which is when the humanoid died. So I'm just going to copy this line and then paste it inside this function instead. So just a quick review of this function. This line right here waits for the player to join the game. This line waits for the character to get added. After that, we're waiting for the humanoid to die. When the humanoid dies, we're going to run this function right here. We're going to send the player's position, and that position is going to get stored in this variable right here. And then what we're doing is we're creating a new part. We're putting that in the workspace, and then we're creating that part at the position of the player's death. Alright, so let's go ahead and run the code and see if this part is working. Okay, and when this player dies, you see the part spawns into the game. So the next thing we need to do is write a script so that when the player touches it, it increases the player's ammo. Okay, so the script we're going to write for the ammo drop is going to go under the server storage. So go ahead and just insert a script and call it ammo drop. So for the script, we're going to start by saying local ammo. And this is going to be equal to script.parent. Next, we're going to be using a remote event to be able to update the player's ammo. So to do that, we need to add another remote event inside of replicated storage. So inside of replicated storage, just go ahead and add another remote event and call it ammo pickup. It's important that you rename this to this name because we're going to be referencing it by the name in the script. So make sure under replicated storage, you add a remote event and rename it to ammo pickup. Okay, after you do that, we're going to say local replicated storage. And this is going to be equal to game get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put replicated storage. After that, we'll say local, and then we'll just say ammo event. Make sure I spell ammo correctly. And we're going to set this equal to replicated storage. We'll say wait for child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put the name of the remote event, which is ammo pickup. After that, we're going to create a function that will run whenever the part gets touched. So we'll say local function. The name of the function can be ammo underscore pickup. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass other part. Now inside this function, we're going to start by saying local humanoid is equal to other part dot parent. And then we'll say find first child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put humanoid. After that, we're going to create a variable for the player. So we'll say local player is equal to game.players find first child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put other part dot parent dot name. And then if we're able to find the humanoid part, so we have a humanoid object and the player exists, then what we're going to do is we're going to say local gun, and that's going to be equal to humanoid dot parent find first child. And what we're going to be looking for is just a tool. So instead of saying find first child, we're going to say find first child, which is A. So this looks for a type of object. And the type of object that we're going to be looking for is a tool. Then if we're able to find the gun, what we're going to do is say ammo event, fire client. We need to pass which client, so that's going to be player. And then after that, we're going to destroy the ammo pickup by saying ammo, and destroy. Alright, so this line right here is kind of assuming that the gun is going to be in the player's hand. If the player unequips the weapon, then we would need to check for it in the backpack as well. But I think this is a good start, and then if we need to, we'll add that other check later on. Okay, so at the end here, we just want to say ammo, touched, connect. And then we're going to be connecting this with our function, which is ammo _pickup. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is attach this script to the part whenever it gets created. So to do that, we're going to head back to our leaderboard script. And inside of our ammo drop function, we're going to add a couple more lines. So we'll say local ammo script. This is going to be equal to game.server storage. Inside the server storage, we're going to say find first child. And then we're going to be looking for ammo drop. And then we're going to say and clone to make a copy of it. And then we'll say ammo script.parent is equal to ammo. So this line creates a copy of the script. And then by saying ammo script.parent, we're setting where it's going to be located. And we want to attach it to the ammo part that we created up here. And finally, on the client side, what we want to do is whenever the remote event gets triggered, we want to update the ammo GUI to display the correct ammo information. So we're going to head back to the local script that's inside the gun. And on this script, the first thing we need to do is add the remote event to this section right here. So we'll say local ammo event is going to be equal to replicated storage, wait for child. Here we're going to be waiting for ammo pickup. And then we're going to head to the very bottom of the script. And down under this section right here, we're going to say ammo event .onClient event. And then we're going to connect this with a function. Inside this function, what we're going to do is we're going to say gun.maxammo.value is going to be equal to the original value plus 10. So this value right here you can adjust depending on how much ammo you want to give the player. And finally, we'll just update the ammo GUI by calling the function. So we'll just say update_ammo. And that's kind of the nice thing about doing that function, rather than having that long string of code, which I noticed that we didn't update it right here. So let's fix that real quick. So instead of that, we're just going to say update ammo. So like I was saying, rather than have that big string of code, we can just call the function, and the function will handle it up top. Alright, so let's go and run the code and check it out just to make sure we didn't make any mistakes. Okay, so the part still gets created, so let's see if I touch the part, if I get more ammo. Alright, so everything looks good. So you can see at the bottom right hand corner, for the ammo GUI, it went from 15 to 25, so that means it's increasing. So let's just go and try it one more time. Alright, so everything looks good. So before we end with this video, let's go and take a look and see how we can customize this part. Alright, so any customizing that you want to do for this part is going to occur in this function right here. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples. So some different things you can do are change the size and change the color. So let's go and say ammo.size. And it's going to be equal to a vector3.new. And let's go and make it a little bit smaller. So let's try 2 by 2 by 2. And also let's change the color. So let's say ammo.brickcolor. And let's set this equal to brickcolor.new. And then we'll just choose a random color. Let's do maybe green. And let's go ahead and try that out and see how it looks. Alright, and now you can see for the ammo drop, it has a green color and it's also a different shape. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to design it however you want to. It's also possible to create a model and store it in replicated storage, and then clone it and bring it into the game. So if that's something you guys are interested in, let me know and we can do a video on that. For now though, this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by adding a headshot system. And also, in addition to the ammo drop, we're also going to add a health drop. So let me go ahead and show off the headshot first. So if a player gets shot in the head, they die instantly. And you can see in addition to the ammo drop, which is this black part here, you also get a health drop, which is the red part in the background. Alright, so we're going to start off by working on the headshot system. To do that, we're going to be opening the script that should be in the server storage, and it should be called damage. So inside the script right here, this is the line of code that does damage to the other player when they get shot by a bullet. And what we want to do is to check which body part the bullet hits. So if it hits the head, we're going to do more damage. If it hits any other part of the body, we'll just do the normal 30. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if other part. So this is the other part that the bullet comes in contact with. So if other part dot name is equal to, and then head, then what we're going to do is we're going to say humanoid colon take damage. And this time, instead of 30, we're going to set it to 100. Okay, so if it's not the head, we're going to say else. And if it's any other body part besides the head, we're just going to do the normal amount of damage. And if you want to, you can do other body parts. So let's say you want to make the torso maybe 50. Then what you can do in that case is just add an else if statement. So you do that by saying else if, and then you're going to define your other condition. So let's say other part dot name, and let's say that's equal to humanoid root part. So this would be like the main part of the player. So if we hit the player there, then maybe we want to do something like 50 damage. Or if you want it a little bit higher, maybe 75. Alright, and you can do this with as many body parts as you want to. So while we're here, let's do one additional thing. So let's add a sound whenever the player gets a headshot. So to do that, you can just use the toolbox, go under the audio section, and then search for something like headshot. Go ahead and just try out a couple of them and find one that you like. Headshot. Alright, so that one works for me. So for this one, I'm just going to insert it into the workspace. So over on the Explore menu, I just click on the workspace, and then click on the sound. So up here at the top, we're going to start by making a variable for the sound. To do that, we can say something like local headshot, and then we'll do underscore sound, and this is going to be equal to game.workspace dot, and then at this point, it'll be the name of our sound. So in our case, the name of our sound is headshot in all capital letters. After that, we're going to play the sound whenever the player gets a headshot. So that'll be this section right here. So right below this line right here, what we're going to do is say headshot, underscore sound, colon, and play. Alright, so let's go ahead and try it out and see if it plays the sound. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot this player in the head. And we're going to be checking to make sure that they die instantly, and also the sound plays. Alright, so everything looks good. So my player dies instantly when they get shot in the head, and we also have that sound playing. So next, we're going to go ahead and move on to the health drop. Okay, so now to make the health drop, we're going to go under the leaderboard script that should be in server script service. So from before, this was our section that created the ammo drop, so it's going to be very similar for the health drop. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste the section. We'll change this to health drop. And then we'll just change the variable name. So instead of ammo, we're going to say health. For now, I'm just going to get rid of these two lines because we're going to write a separate script for it. And there's still a few more changes we need to change up here. So instead of ammo drop, let's change it to health drop. And then for the color, let's change it to red. All right, so let's just go and double check real quick to make sure all the things are changed. So up here, it should say drop_health. All right, and everything else looks good. All right, so the next thing we need to do is drop down here. And just like we did a function call for the drop ammo, we're going to do one for the health. So we're going to say drop_health. And then we're going to pass the same information, which is where the player dies. So you can just copy this part right here and paste it inside the parentheses. And just to make things a little bit easier to read, I'm just going to space out these lines a little bit. All right, so what we're doing is we're calling the function for the drop ammo, which is going to run this function up here. And then right below it, we're going to run the drop health function, which is going to run this part right here. All right, so now let's just go ahead and test and make sure when the player dies, it pops out that part. And then after that, if that's working, then we'll write the script for it. Okay, so that looks good. I see my ammo drop right here, and also my health drop right here. Right now, the ammo drop is working, and it gives me more ammo. But if I try to touch the health part right now, it doesn't do anything. So that's the last part that we need to do, is write a script so that when I touch this health part, it increases my player's health. To write the script for the health drop, we're going to do that in the server storage. So go ahead and click on the plus sign, and then we're going to be adding a script. Go ahead and rename the script to health drop. For this script here, we're going to start by saying local health is equal to script.parent. After that, we're going to make a function that'll run whenever this part gets touched. So we'll say local function. The name of our function can be heal. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass other part, which will be the other object that this part comes in contact with. Now inside this function, we're going to make a reference for the humanoid and also the player. So we'll say local humanoid. And this is going to be equal to other part dot parent colon find first child. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to say humanoid. After that, we're going to make a reference for the player. So we'll say local player. And this is going to be equal to game.players colon find first child. Inside here, we're going to say other part dot parent dot name. After that, we're going to say if humanoid and player. So if it was able to find a humanoid object and that object is also a player, then what we're going to do is one more check. We're going to say if humanoid dot health, if that's greater than 0. And the reason we're doing this is the part might accidentally touch the player that just died, and it might disappear because it touched that player. So to fix that, what we're going to do is make sure that whichever humanoid object that we're touching has health greater than 0. Okay, so if the health is greater than 0, then what we're going to do is we're going to say health colon destroy. And then after that, we're going to say humanoid dot health is going to be equal to the original health, so humanoid dot health. And then we're going to add 50 to it. So this value right here, you can change depending on how much health you want to give the player. And let's change this up a little bit. Rather than putting the value here, let's make it into a variable that we can store up top. So let's do heal underscore value. And then up top here, we're going to define that value. So we'll say local heal underscore value. And we'll set that equal to 50. That way later on, when you're going through the script again, you don't have to remember what that value meant. It's stored in a variable that's easy to reference. And anytime you make a change in this variable right here, it's going to update it down here as well. All right, so the last thing we need to do for this script is link this function to the touch event. And we can do that by saying health.touched colon connect. And then we're going to connect this to our function. All right, so let's go ahead and run the game and we can check it out. All right, so right now my player is damaged, so I'm going to kill this player to get the health drop. And we can see right now that it doesn't work, and the reason for that is we didn't actually attach the script that we just wrote to the part. So let's go ahead and do that real quick, and then we'll try again. Okay, so to attach the script to the actual part, what we need to do is go back to the leaderboard script. And what we're going to do is we're going to say local health script. And we're going to say that's equal to game.server storage, which is where the script is located. And then we're going to say find first child. And then we're going to put the name of the script, which is health drop. We're going to make a copy of it by saying clone. And then after that, we're going to attach it to the part by saying health script dot parent is equal to our health part. All right, so let's go ahead and run the game again and see if it's working now. All right, so we'll give it another shot. So we'll go ahead and kill this player. Okay, and then we'll go over and get the health drop. And we can see when I got the health drop that it restored a good portion of my health. And if you want to, you can either increase or decrease that value. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue to work on our first-person shooter, and this time around we're going to make grenades. And the way this is going to work, we can press a letter on the keyboard, like let's say the letter R, and it throws a grenade. Alright, so to make these grenades, we're going to start under the started player, and then underneath the started player scripts, we're going to be adding a local script. Inside the script here, we're going to be using the user input service. So let's go ahead and start with a variable for that. So we'll say local, and then user input. And this is going to be equal to game::get_service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put user input service. After that, we're going to define the player. So we'll say local player. And this is going to be equal to game.players.localPlayer. The next thing we're going to do is define a function that'll run whenever some type of input is detected. So we'll say local function. The name of the function can be throw. We're going to pass in two parameters. One's going to be input. The other one is going to be game processed. Inside this function, we're going to start by saying if not game processed. Then what we're going to do is say if input dot user input type. And we're going to check to see if this is equal to enum dot user input type. And then from this list of user input types, we're going to check to see if the keyboard was pressed. If we notice some input from the keyboard, then what we're going to do is check to see which letter on the keyboard that was. So we'll say local key code. And we're going to set this equal to input dot key code. So that'll store whichever letter was pressed. And then to check to see if it was our target letter, we're going to say if key code is equal to enum dot key code. So from all the possible key codes, we're going to be checking for the letter R. If the letter R was pressed, then what we're going to do first is just print. And then inside the parentheses, we'll just say something like grenade. Alright, so the reason we're doing that is just as a simple test so that we know this is working. Once we know that it's picking up that the letter R was pressed, then we can actually write some code that'll make the grenade. So that handles the function. So down here at the bottom, we're going to say user input dot input began :connect. And then we're going to connect this with our throw function. Alright, so let's go ahead and run the game and see if this part is working. Alright, so if you have the output open, then when you press the letter R, you can see that the word grenade is printed in the output. So that lets us know that everything's working. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which will be actually creating the grenade. Okay, so to make these grenades appear on the server, what we're going to have to do is use remote events. So before we head back to the scripting, let's start under replicated storage. And we're going to add a new remote event. And we're going to rename this event to grenade event. After you do that, we're going to head back to our local script inside of starter player scripts. And let's go ahead and rename this one to grenade. Inside the script here, we're going to start with variables for the replicated storage and also for the remote event. So right here, we'll say local replicated storage. And we're going to set that equal to game::get_service. Inside the parentheses, we'll put replicated storage. Next, we're going to make a variable for the remote event. So we'll say local, and then grenade event. And we'll set that equal to replicated storage, which is where it's located. We'll say colon, wait for child. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to put grenade event. Alright, so now instead of printing the word grenade, we're going to trigger the remote event. So we'll say grenade event, colon, fire server. And inside the parentheses will be information we send to the server. So what we want to send to the server is the position of the mouse. So to do that, we're going to create one more variable up top here. So for this one, we'll say local mouse. And we'll set this equal to player, colon, and get mouse. Then down here in the parentheses, we'll say mouse dot hit dot p. So what this is going to do, it's going to take the current position of the mouse, and it'll send that to the server. So next, to actually script this on the server side, we're going to head up to the server script service, click on the plus sign and add a script. Go ahead and rename this script to grenade create. Inside of this script, we're going to start with the same two variables for the replicated storage and also for the remote event. So let's just go ahead and go back to this script real quick and we'll copy them. After that, we're going to write a function that'll run whenever this remote event gets triggered. So we'll say grenade event dot on server event, and then we'll say colon connect. Inside the parentheses, we're going to say function. So this script is going to be very similar to when we created the bullet. So what we're going to do is we're going to say local grenade is going to be equal to instance dot new. We're going to be creating a part. And then after this, we're just going to be defining some properties of the part, and then we'll actually make this grenade move. So first we'll say grenade dot name, and this is going to be equal to grenade. Then we'll say grenade dot parent, and this is going to be equal to game dot workspace. We'll say grenade dot shape, and this time instead of a cylinder, let's go ahead and choose a ball shape. So we'll say enum dot part type, and then from the part types, we're going to select ball. Then we're going to set its size. So we'll say grenade dot size, and this is going to be equal to vector3 dot new. And then here is where you're going to define the size of your grenade. I found that doing 1 by 1 by 1 works pretty well. But if you want to, you can either increase or decrease these numbers to adjust the size of it. After that, we're going to define its color. So we'll say grenade dot brick color is going to be equal to brick color dot new. And then for this, I'm going to choose dark green. Alright, so the next part we're going to work on is actually getting this grenade to move when the player presses the letter R. So I'm going to start by saying local speed, and I'm going to set this equal to 100. You can adjust this value here depending on how far and how fast you want the grenade to go. So after the speed, we're going to say grenade dot cframe is going to be equal to cframe dot new. Inside the parentheses, we're going to give it the starting location and also the ending location. And while I'm thinking about that, I forgot to put the parameters inside the function here. So inside this function, we're going to get the player, which will be the player that pressed the letter R. And in addition to that, we also gave it the position of the mouse, which is this value right here. So I can store that inside of a variable, and let's just call it mouse, and then POS for position. Okay, so for my C frame, the starting position is going to be player dot character. And then I'm going to start it at the player's head, so I'm going to say dot head dot position. Okay, so that's where the grenade's going to start. And then the ending position is going to be wherever the mouse is. So I'm going to say mouse, and then POS. Finally, we're going to say grenade dot velocity is going to be equal to grenade dot cframe dot look vector. And then we're going to multiply this by our speed. Alright, so we still need to add another script that's going to make this grenade explode. But for now, let's just go ahead and test it out and make sure that when I press the letter R, it shoots off the grenade. Alright, so I'm going to press the letter R and we can see if the grenade gets created. Alright, and we can see when I press the letter R that a green ball shoots from the player's head. And if you want to, you can adjust that speed value to either increase or decrease the speed, and also how far the grenade's going to go. Alright, so now that that's working, the next step is going to be writing a script that's going to make this green ball explode. So to do that, we're going to write a script in the server storage. So we'll click on the plus sign, and then press on script. I'm going to rename the script to grenade explode. And then for the script, what we're going to do is say local grenade is going to be equal to script dot parent. After that, we're going to wait for 1 second. And you can either keep it like that if you want to, or if you'd rather use a variable, then you can do something like explode time. And then up here, you can define what explode time is. So we'll say local explode time. And you can set that to whatever value you want. So if you do 1 second, then 1 second after the grenade gets created, it's going to explode. If you do it for maybe 3 seconds, then it's going to take a lot longer before the grenade explodes. Alright, so after it waits for that set period of time, we're going to say local explosion. And this is going to be equal to instance dot new. And inside the parentheses, we're going to put explosion. Next, we're going to say explosion dot parent, and this is going to be equal to game dot workspace explosion dot position, and this is going to be equal to the position of the grenade. So we'll say grenade dot position. After that, we're going to say explosion dot blast radius, and we're going to set this to some value. So if we say something like 10, then in a 10 stud radius is where the parts are going to be affected by this explosion. If you want to, like we did before, let's go ahead and convert this number into a variable. So we can say something like radius, and then up top here, we'll say local radius, and we'll set this equal to 10. If you want a larger blast radius, then increase this number. If you want a smaller radius, then decrease the number. And finally, what we're going to do is after the grenade creates the explosion, we're going to get rid of that part. So we'll say grenade, colon, and destroy. And I realized for this whole script, I spelled grenade incorrectly. So let me fix that real quick. Alright, so that looks better now. So the last thing we need to do is attach the script to the grenade part. To do that, we're going to go back to this script right here. And at the bottom here, we're going to say local grenade script. And this is going to be equal to game dot server storage colon find first child. And then what we're looking for is grenade explode. To make a copy of it, we're going to say colon and clone. And then to attach it to the part, we'll say grenade script dot parent is going to be equal to our part. Alright, so let's go ahead and test it out and see if we get our explosion. Okay, so when I press the letter R, I have the grenade, and then after 1 second, it explodes. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter. And what we're going to be working on this time is the start of a Killstreak reward system. So you can call these perks, killstreaks, whatever you want to call it. But the basic idea is giving the player some type of extra perk or boost whenever they rack up a kill streak. So for now, I have it set at 3, 5, and 7. And whenever you reach that particular level, it's going to light up the corresponding perk. So let me go ahead and start by getting 3 kills. Headshot. Okay, and you can see when I get 3 kills that perk 1 turns into the green color. And then if I press the letter Z, it turns back to the red color like I used the perk. I don't have these perks set up yet, but what we're going to do is start with this GUI system, and then you guys can let me know what type of perks or boosts that you want to see for these different levels. Alright, so to create this GUI, we're going to go under Starter GUI, and then we're going to go inside of our Screen GUI, and the first thing we're going to do is add another frame. So go ahead and drag this frame near the bottom or wherever else you want to put it. Go ahead and resize it. For this example, I'm going to put 3 different perks in there, but if you want to include more perks, that's completely fine. So once you have it at the size that you want, you can go ahead and customize this frame to look however you want to. All I'm going to do for this frame is go down to the Style section, and then change it from Custom to Drop Shadow. After that, I'm going to be adding 3 different text buttons. I'm going to be using text buttons, but if you want to use image buttons instead, that's completely fine. So for now, I'm just going to insert 1 text button. I'm going to rename it. For the name, I'm just going to say P1 for perk 1. After that, I'm going to resize it. So I'm going to leave a little space at the bottom to put a label. So let's go ahead and press the plus sign and we'll insert a text label. And then for this text label, I'm going to rename it. So for this one, I'm going to use the letter Z to activate it. So I'm just going to put the letter Z for the name of it. And then at this point, we're just going to customize it to look however we want. So I'm just going to make a few changes, such as what the text says, and also the color. So for the button itself, I'm going to go down to the text section and change it from button to perk 1. I'm going to use this option right here, which says text scaled. I'm going to change the font to this one right here. For the color, we're going to go up a little bit. For background color 3, I'm going to choose red. And then for the transparency, I'm going to change it to 0.75. Okay, for the label, what I'm going to do is go down to the text section and just put the letter Z. I'm going to do text scaled and then change the font. And then for transparency, I'm going to change this one to 1. Alright, so once you have it set up for one button, what you can do is just select both of these items. So you can click on the first one, hold the control key, and then click on the second one. And then what you want to do is hold the control key and press the letter D to duplicate. You can just move it over a little bit, and then press it one more time. And then all you have to do at this point is just make a few changes so it says perk 2 and perk 3. And then for the letters at the bottom, it'll say X and C. Okay, and once you finish customizing, it should look something like this. So under the frame here, we're going to have P1, P2, and P3, and then the different letters. And then for each one, I just changed the text to correspond with the particular button or label. One additional thing that you probably want to do with this GUI is scale it so that it looks good on all screen sizes. To do that, you can download a plugin. The plugin that I'm using is Auto Scale Lite, and to use this plugin, all you have to do is click on the GUI item, and then click on Unit Conversion, and then under the size section, you just want to press Scale. And then for each item inside the frame, you want to do the same thing. So for all the text buttons and all the text labels, you just want to press Scale for the size option. Okay, and the final thing we're going to do for this GUI is just rename our frame to Killstreaks. Okay, so next we're going to start working on the scripting for this. The first thing we're going to do is go under the server script service and click on our leaderboard script. We're going to be adding another int value that'll keep track of the player's current kill streak. So right below kills here, what we're going to do is we're going to say local streak is going to be equal to instance.new. And here we're going to be creating an int value. We'll say streak.value is going to be equal to 0. We'll say streak dot name is going to be equal to streak. And then finally, we'll say streak dot parent is going to be equal to player. If you want to, you can also store this value in the Leaderstats by changing it from player to Leaderstats. Just keep in mind that if you do that, there's going to be a few spots in the code that we're about to write that you're going to have to update as well. Okay, so once you add that section, what we're going to do is we're going to head back to our Killstreaks frame and add a local script. Okay, so in the script, we're going to start with a reference for the frame. So we'll say local frame. It's going to be equal to script.parent. After that, we're going to create variables for our 3 different buttons. So we'll say local perk1. This is going to be equal to frame colon wait for child. And then here we're going to say P1. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this 2 more times. This is going to be perk2 and perk3. And then here we're going to say P2 and P3. Next, we're going to create a variable for the player. So we'll say local player is going to be equal to game.players.localPlayer. Then we're going to make a variable for our streaks value. So we'll say local streak is going to be equal to player colon wait for child. And what we're looking for is the streak value. So the streak value right here is the one that we just created on our leaderboard script. All right, so what we want to do next is every time the streak value changes, we want to check to see what it is and see if the player has earned a kill streak. So to do that, we're going to say streak dot changed colon connect. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put function. And the first kill streak that we want to check for is when the player gets 3 kills. So we'll say if streak dot value is equal to 3. Then what we want to do is take perk1 and change the background color from red to green. So to do that, we're going to say perk1 dot background color. And we're going to set this equal to color3 dot new. And to make this green, we're going to put 0 for the red value, 255 for the green, and then 0 for the blue. After that, we're going to say else if streak dot value is equal to 5. So this will be the next level. In that case, we want to change the color of perk2. So we'll say perk2. And rather than retype this, I'm just going to copy and paste. And we'll just change this to perk2. And then finally, we'll do one more check. We'll say else if. This time, streak.value. If that's equal to 7, then we'll change perk3 to green. All right, so that's good for now. So the next thing we're going to do is head back to the leaderboard script. And on this script, what we're going to do is whenever a player gets a kill, in addition to giving them 1 for the kills value, we're also going to give them 1 for the streaks value. So we'll say killer tag dot streak dot value, and this is going to be equal to the original value. And then we're going to say +1. So while we're here, whenever a player dies, we also want to reset the streaks value back to 0. So we can do that right here. And we can do that by saying player.streak.value is equal to 0. So in this section right here, player is referring to the player that died, and then killer tag is the player that kills the other player. All right, so let's go ahead and run the code and see if it's working. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get some kills, and we'll see if our different perks light up. Okay, so it looks like perk 1 is good. So let's go ahead and get 2 more kills and see if perk 2 lights up.
Headshot. Headshot.
Okay, so perk 2 is working, so 2 more kills, and then we'll know that all of them are working.
Headshot.
Alright, so everything looks good. So the last thing we're going to do for this video is whenever I press either the X, the Z, or the C key, it's going to change them from green back to red, just like they were being used. Okay, so to do the scripting so that when I press the 3 different keys on the keyboard, it affects the perk buttons, what we're going to do is go back under the local script that should be inside of your Killstreaks frame. And since we're going to be doing stuff with input, we're going to have to get user input. So to do that, we're going to start by making a variable for the user input service. So right over here, we're going to say local user input. And we're going to set this equal to game, get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put user input service. After that, we're going to be making our function like we did for some of the other scripts. And just to save us a little bit of time, you can go ahead and go to one of the other scripts where we use this and just copy it. And then we'll paste it in this script and just make some changes. So for this one, for the function name, you can change it to something like perk. And then change it down here as well. Okay, so now for this part, we're going to say for the letter Z. And what we want to do is change the perk's background color back to red. So we're going to change this part back to 0. And then for this, it's going to be 255. And then what we can do is we can copy this section twice. So we'll do copy, and then paste, and then paste. Here, we're going to change it from key code Z to X, and then C. Here, we're going to change it to perk 2 and perk 3. All right, and then the next thing we want to do is just convert these from if statements to else ifs. So we'll do that one and also this one. All right, and there we go. So let's go ahead and try it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a few kills to rack up a kill streak. And then we'll make sure these buttons change it back from the green color to the red color.
Headshot. Headshot.
Alright, so we earned our first kill streak. So what I'm going to do now is press the letter Z like we were going to use it. And we'll see if it changes back to the red color. Alright, so that looks good.
Headshot.
Alright, and finally we'll just test out the last 2. So I earned the last 2 kill streaks, so if I press the letter X, it goes back to red, and also the same for perk 3. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. If you have any ideas of what we should do for our different kill streaks, go ahead and let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by making the gun follow the mouse, like you see here. So whenever I move the mouse up, the gun goes with it, and when I move it down, it also goes with the mouse. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So the script we're going to be using to make the gun follow the mouse is a modified version of something I found online, and I'll link that article in the description. This was the article that I used, and the program was created by the user Clever Source. Originally what he did is he had the player's torso and head follow the mouse. So what I did is I modified it. I kept the head part so it went with the mouse, but instead of moving the torso, I just moved the right arm. If you want to take a look at this, you can. It'll be linked in the description. To add the script to the game, what you're going to do is go under the started player folder and then find the started player scripts. You're going to be adding a local script and go ahead and rename it to follow mouse. I'm not going to go through this script because it's pretty complex. I will explain the basics though in just a second. I'm going to have this script linked in the description so that you can just copy and paste it. So some of the changes that I made from the original script is, like I said before, rather than moving the torso, which is what the original script here does, it moves the head and the torso. So I changed that part from the torso to the right arm. So here we have the right arm, and I kept the head and neck the same, so it also moves the head with the mouse. And then one additional change that I made is in the original program it used arctangent. I changed that to arcsine, and I'll explain what that is in just a second, but that was really the only two changes that I needed to make from the original. So I changed the torso part to arm and shoulder, and then instead of using the arctangent function, I used the arcsine. Alright, so like I said before, don't worry about trying to copy this from the screen. There's going to be a link in the description where you can just copy and paste this. So now that we have the script, let me try to explain the basics of it. Alright, so what we're trying to do with the script is always have the gun facing the mouse so that it moves with the camera. So rather than having it facing forward like it is here, we would rather it look like this. So we want the gun to always be facing toward the mouse. To do that, we need to rotate the gun from the forward position, which is represented by this red line here, and we want to move it to the green position, which is a line from the gun to the mouse. And to do that, we need to figure out what the angle is between those two lines. This is going to involve some trigonometry, so to figure out what this angle right here is, we need to know the length of two of the sides of this triangle. So the two sides that we're going to find are going to be the opposite side, which is the side that's directly opposite of the angle. And then we're also going to find the hypotenuse, which is going to be the line that goes from the gun here to the mouse. So like I said before, we need to figure out the length of these two sides. So starting with the hypotenuse, which is the side right here, starting from the gun to the mouse. In the code, that's calculated with this line right here. So what they're doing is they're taking the position of the head, which is this part right here. And that's going to be a vector, so it's going to have an x, a y, and a z part. And then they're also taking the position of the mouse, which is this value right here. And what they're doing first is they're subtracting those two vectors, and then taking the magnitude of it. And by taking the magnitude of that, it's going to give the distance. So this line right here will give us the length of this side of the triangle right here. And then to figure out the length of the opposite side, which goes from this corner up here down to the bottom corner, it's calculated with this line of code right here. And the basic idea for this one is what we're going to do is we're going to take the height of the mouse and subtract it from the height of the head. The height of the mouse would be this part right here, point.y. And then the height of the head would be this part over here where it says head.cframe.y. And then they're subtracting those two values to get the length of this side right here. So now that we have the length of the hypotenuse and also the length of the opposite side, what we can do is use the arcsine function to figure out what the angle is. So for the arcsine function, if we give it the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse, it'll give us the angle we need right here. So that's the basic idea for the math that's working in the script. There's some other parts of that are more specific to Roblox and how the character works, but that's the basic idea for the math of it. So just as a quick recap, to figure out what the rotation angle is, we need to figure out what the opposite side is, and also the hypotenuse. And we calculate that with those two lines in the code. This is how the hypotenuse is calculated. This is how the opposite side is calculated. So once you have those two different values, then you can use the arcsine function to get the angle of rotation that we need. So just going back to the code real quick, this line right here would represent the hypotenuse of our triangle. This line right here would represent the opposite side of our triangle. And then you can see down here we're using the arcsine function with the ratio of those two different values. Alright, so I hope that helps you understand the script a little bit. Like I said before, the script is going to be linked in the description, so you can just click on that link and then copy and paste it into the game. This is going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. In today's video, we're going to continue with our first-person shooter by adding killstreaks. For the first killstreak, I decided to give the players a speed boost and also a jump boost. So when they activate perk 1, they're going to have a speed boost and also a jump boost for 10 seconds. After the 10 seconds, it'll go back to normal. Okay, so my 10 seconds are up, so the player went back to normal. For perk 2, I decided to do an instant kill. So no matter where the bullet hits the other player, it's going to kill them immediately. So let's go and take a look at that one. So after you activate the perk, no matter where the player gets hit, it kills them instantly. And like perk 1, you're going to have that for 10 seconds. And then for perk 3, I decided on a force field. So when you activate that perk, you're going to have a force field for 10 seconds. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is locate our local script that we wrote for our Killstreaks GUI here. So that'll be under the starter GUI, inside the screen GUI, And then inside of the frame that says Killstreaks, we should have a local script. This is what we had from a prior video, and basically this section here is just taking a look at the kill streak value. And then if you get a certain number of kills, then it's going to light up one of these buttons down here. Then this section down here, once you actually activate the kill streak, it's going to change the button color from green back to red. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is make it so that you can only activate the kill streak once you have enough kills. So right now, the only condition for activating the kill streak is pressing a certain button. But what we want to do instead is make sure that the player actually has enough kill streaks before we give them the reward for it. So to do that, we're going to create a couple more variables up top here. We're going to start by saying local streak 1. And we're going to set that equal to false because they haven't earned it yet. We're going to do the same thing for the other kill streaks. So we'll say local streak 2. And that's going to be equal to false. And then finally local streak 3. And once again, it's going to be equal to false. So at some point in the script, we want to change those from false to true. And we're going to do that in this section right here. So once the player gets 3 kills, then we want to set streak 1 equal to true. So we'll say streak 1 is equal to true. And then when they get 5, we want to set streak 2 equal to true. So we'll say streak 2 is equal to true. And then finally for the last one, we'll say streak 3 is equal to true. Alright, so now down in this section right here, we want to add that extra condition. So in addition to pressing the key, we also want to make sure that they're able to claim this kill streak. So for the Z one, we're going to say and streak 1. So if they press the letter Z and streak 1 is equal to true, then we'll go ahead and activate the kill streak. And then we'll do the same thing for our other keys. So for the X key, we're going to say and streak 2. And then finally for the last one, we're going to say and streak 3. Okay, so next, since we want the effects of these kill streaks to appear on the server side, we're going to have to use remote events. So let's go ahead and get that set up. So the first thing we're going to do is come under replicated storage here. And we're going to add a new remote event. And we're going to go ahead and change the name of it. And the new name is going to be Streaks Event. Alright, after we do that, we're going to create a couple variables for the replicated storage and also for the remote event. So we can do that right below this line right here. First, we'll start by saying local replicated storage. And that's going to be equal to game :get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put replicated storage. Then we're going to make a variable for the remote event. So we'll say local streaks event. And that's going to be equal to replicated storage, wait for child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put the name of the remote event. So that's going to be streaks event. Okay, so now that we have that, we're ready to trigger the remote events at different points in the script. So we're going to scroll down a little bit to this section right here. And we're going to go ahead and start on the first one, which is going to give the player a jump boost and also a speed boost. Okay, so in this section right here, where the player is activating streak 1, what we're going to do is say streaks event, fire server. And then we're going to pass a few pieces of information. We're going to put the string perk1. And then we're going to put a comma, and we're also going to pass the value for streak 1. So this will either be true or false. Alright, so that's all we can do on the local side. So now we're going to write a script on the server side that's actually going to give the player the perk. To do that, we're going to go under the server script service and add a new script. Let's go ahead and rename this one to streak. Okay, so now in this script, we're going to start with the same variables for the replicated storage and also for the remote event. So let's just go ahead and copy them from the script right here. So we're going to take these two lines and copy them. So we'll do Control-C, and then we'll paste them on this script right here. Next, we're going to create a function. So we'll say local function. The name of the function can be giveStreak. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass a couple of parameters. The first one is going to be player. So this is the player that triggered the remote event. We're also going to pass perk, and that's going to be this value right here, the string value that we passed right here. And then finally, we're going to pass one more that we're going to call give. And this is going to be either true or false based on what this value right here is. Okay, so now inside this function, we're going to say if give, then, and the reason we're using this give value is because eventually we want to take away the kill streak. So after the 10 seconds, we want to take away the speed boost and also the jump boost. So this is how we're going to do it, by using this give value. Okay, so inside this if statement, we're going to say if perk. So this is referring to this value right here. And we're going to say if that's equal to, and then perk1. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say player dot character dot humanoid. And then from the humanoid, we're going to say dot walk speed. And we're going to set that equal to whatever value you want to. I'm going to go ahead and set it at 60, but you're welcome to either increase or decrease that number. Okay, so in addition to increasing their walk speed, we also want to increase their jump boost. So we're going to say player dot character dot humanoid dot jump boost. And you can also set this to whatever value you want. I'm going to go ahead and choose 100. Okay, so this section of code right here is only going to run if give is equal to true. So let's go ahead and define what's going to happen if give is equal to false. So to do that, we can just use an else statement. And then inside this else statement, what I'm going to do is copy these lines of code right here and paste them inside the else statement. And then for these two numbers right here, we're just going to set them back to the defaults. So for walk speed, we're going to set that back to 16. And then for jump boost, we're going to set that back to 50. Okay, so now we want to run this function whenever the remote event gets triggered. And we're going to do that down at the bottom by saying streaks event dot on server event. And we're going to connect this to our function by saying :connect. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to put give underscore streak. Okay, so now before we test this out, we're going to head back to the local script real quick. So now that we're back on the local script, we're going to add some more code to this section right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say wait for 10 seconds. And you can choose whatever time you want to. So basically, it's going to give them this perk for 10 seconds. And then we want to remove it afterwards. Okay, so after those 10 seconds are up, we're going to say streak1 is equal to false. And then we're going to trigger that remote event again. So I'm just going to copy this line and paste it down below. So the difference now is streak1 is equal to false. So on our script over here, it's going to default to this section over here, which is going to change the walk speed back to 16 and the jump boost back to 50. All right, so let's go ahead and run the code and make sure this part is working. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get my 3 kills, and then we can try it out. Okay, so I earned perk 1. Let's go ahead and activate it. So now I can see that I have a speed boost and also a jump boost. So what we're going to be checking for next is after 10 seconds, I should go back to normal. All right, and there we go. So after the 10 seconds, it goes back to the normal walk speed and also the jump boost. All right, so it looks like perk 1 is good. So let's go ahead and move on to perk 2. Okay, so perk 2 is probably the hardest one to set up, but we're going to start under the local script. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy the lines of code that we wrote for perk 1. And then we're going to paste them under perk 2. And then we just need to change the names of them. So this time it's going to be perk 2. And we're going to change this to streak 2. Down here, it'll be streak 2 equals false. And then finally down here, it'll be perk 2 and streak 2. Okay, and the next spot we're going to head to is going to be the leaderboard script that should be under the server script service. And we're going to go ahead and create a new value. So we're going to say local instakill. And this is going to be equal to instance.new. And this is going to be a bool value. So it's either going to be true or false. You can think of it like on or off. After that, we're going to say instakill.name is going to be equal to instakill. Then we're going to say instakill.value is going to be equal to false. So basically it's going to be off. And then finally we're going to say instakill.name dot parent, and that's going to be equal to the player. Okay, so next we're going to jump to the script we called streak. We're going to start by adding a new section up here. So we're going to say else if, and this time we're checking if perk is equal to perk2. And if that's the case, then what we're going to do is we're going to say player dot instakill. So that's the value we just created. And we want to say dot value. So originally it's set to false, but to turn it on, we want to set it equal to true. And then like we did before, down here under the else statement, we want to reverse that. So we're going to copy this line of code right here. And then paste it down here. And this time, instead of equal to true, it's going to be equal to false. Okay, and finally to get this all set up, we're going to go under the server storage and modify the script we called damage. Okay, so in this script, we're going to start by getting the player that shot the bullet. So we're going to say local shooter. And this is going to be equal to game.players. And then here we're going to say colon, find first child. Inside the parentheses is going to be bullet. So this is the actual bullet object. And then on this bullet object, we attached a value called attacker. And then to get the name that's stored there, we're going to say dot value. Next, under this section right here, we're going to add another if statement. So we're going to say if shooter dot instakill dot value. If that's equal to true, then what we're going to do is we're going to say humanoid colon take damage. And then for the value of it, we're going to say 100. Okay, so now we actually need all this other stuff to be in an else statement. So we're going to create that right here. And the part that we want to take, it's going to start at this line right here. And it's going to go all the way down to this end right here. So you can just drag that inside the else statement. And then you may need to adjust the formatting a little bit. So underneath this if statement, we're going to press tab. For this else statement, we want to make sure it's in line with this if statement right here. We're going to indent this line right here. And then we're also going to tab this one, and also this one here. And finally, we're going to bring this end right here. All right, and what I would do at this point is just take a few moments and make sure everything on my screen matches what you have on your screen. So basically what's going on here is we're saying if the instant kill value is equal to true, then we're going to deal this amount of damage, which will kill the player instantly. If this is not equal to true, so instant kill will be equal to false, then it's going to do the normal script that we wrote before. Okay, so after you check to make sure everything matches, let's go ahead and try it out. Okay, so I got my 5 kills for perk 2. So what I'm going to do in just a second is activate it, and then I'm going to shoot this player in the leg so that it's obvious to see if it's working or not. Okay, so the perk is activated. We'll shoot him in the leg, and we can see even though we shot the player in the leg and it should do only 30 damage, it kills them instantly instead. So now let's go ahead and wait our 10 seconds and make sure that it turns off. Okay, and we can see after 10 seconds when I shoot in the same spot, it just does the normal damage, which was 30. Alright, so perk 2 is working, so let's go ahead and move on to perk 3. Okay, and just like the other two, for perk 3, we're going to start on the local script, and we're going to go ahead and copy those lines of code again. And then we'll paste it under perk 3. And then we'll just make a few changes like we did before. So it's going to be perk 3, streak 3. Here we're going to set perk 3 equal to false. And then down here, it's going to be perk 3 and streak 3. Okay, after that, we're going to head back to the script called streak. On this script, we're going to define another else statement. So we're going to say else if. This time, we're going to be checking to see if perk is equal to perk 3. And if that's the case, then what we want to do is give the player a force field. So we'll say local force is going to be equal to instance dot new. We want to create a force field. And then we're going to give this force field to the player by saying force dot parent is going to be equal to player dot character. Down below, we want to reverse that and take away the force field. So we're going to start by copying the lines right here, and we'll paste it down below. In this case, we don't need this line right here. and then we're going to change what this one is equal to. So now it's going to be equal to player.character, find first child, and then we're going to add which is A. Inside the parentheses, we're going to be looking for the force field. If we're able to find the force field, so we'll say if force, then we're going to get rid of it by saying force, and destroy. Okay, and this one's not too bad. That's actually all we have to add for it. So let's go ahead and try it out and make sure all 3 perks are working. Okay, so I've earned all 3 perks, so I'm going to go ahead and activate them so that we can double check to make sure everything's working. Okay, so I can see when I activated all the perks, I have the speed boost, I have the force field, and also have the instant kill. And then after 10 seconds, they should all go away. So the 10 seconds are now up, I have normal walk speed, I don't have the force field anymore, and if I shoot the player in the leg, it just does the normal damage. Alright, so it looks like everything's working, so that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one.